Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Issei had 6 different species girlfriends? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the Nefarious doctor for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Let's start this video. In the frostbitten land of Skyrim, where the mountains reached for the heavens and the forests, they whispered ancient secrets, a disturbance stirred in the realm of oblivion, and amidst the swirling chaos of realms beyond mortal comprehension, the mischievous deity, Sheogorath, the Daedric prince of madness, peered into the threads of fate with a gleam of amusement in his eyes. Sheogorath, the Daedric prince, Sheogorath, is one of the few Daedric princes whose creation may be linked to the change or destruction of Enedra. Others include Malakath and Meridia. Old Mary's creation stories attribute his creation to the removal of Larkin's divine spark. In one of these myths, he is described as the Sithis-shaped hole of the world. There's potential for a delightful diversion from the path of Skyrim. Perhaps it's time to have some fun, Sheogorath mused to himself, fingers twirling a lock of his wild hair. With a snap of his fingers, Sheogorath wove a spell of chaos, plucking a soul from its destined path and hurling it across the planes of existence. In the mortal realm of Nirn, a babe's cry echoed through the night as a rift, in reality, opened, depositing the infant onto the rugged terrain of Skyrim. I wonder how Skyrim will be able to handle such a new soul in this world, since this soul will be able to shake things up. Unbeknownst to Sheogorath, his impulsive act of mischief had set into motion a chain of events that would alter the course of history. Within Skyrim, Legitriki trudged through the snow-laden landscape, her breath forming misty clouds in the frigid air. As a seasoned member of the Imperial Legion, she was no stranger to the harsh realities of Skyrim's unforgiving terrain. Yet, even she was taken aback when her patrol heard a faint cry in the air, alerting the general as she ordered her group to search for this scream. Legate and her patrol didn't have to go very far as they stumbled upon the sight of an abandoned infant nestled amidst the frost-dead flora. "By the nine, what have we here?" Legate murmured, her brow furrowing in concern as she approached the babe, cradled within a makeshift bundle of blankets. Her companions gathered around, their expressions a mix of curiosity and disbelief. Legate carefully scooped up the child, his tufts of light brown hair, but also noticed that the child had tints of crimson at the ends of his hair, standing out starkly against the pristine white snow. The patrol of Imperial Legionnaires, clad in their shining armor, were surprised that they stumbled upon such an unexpected sight. "By the divines! What in oblivion is this?" one of the soldiers said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "A babe, abandoned in the wilds of Skyrim. How could a home do such a thing? Perhaps it was those damned stormcloaks due to the child not being a Nord," the soldier murmured, a hint of concern in his voice as he wasn't a large fan of the rebels, as was Legate, as she could believe that stormcloaks would get rid of an infant if the parents did not wish to join the rebels like her. "We can't leave him out here," Legate declared, her voice firm with resolve. "We must bring him back to the fort." Many of the soldiers who had families and children could understand that even their general, who was a seasoned warrior, still cared for children as they ran around and felt safe under their gaze and strength. "We must bring him to safety. The roads are no place for a child," Legate said as she picked up the child, who opened his eyes to see Legate before the small child placed a small hand on her face, causing her expression to soften as a warm smile appeared on her face. With a shared nod of agreement that Legate shared with her soldiers, along with a sense of duty and compassion, the Legionnaires carried the foundling back to their stronghold, nestled amidst the rugged peaks of the Jarl Mountains. The Legionnaires set out for Fort Pale Pass, their footsteps crunching in the snow as they made their way through the wilderness. Legate smiled at the infant as she made sure the baby was close to her body so the infant could receive warmth and comfort. The baby seemed to enjoy this as his curious brown eyes touched the armor Legate was wearing before a few hours passed as a howl penetrated the air, causing her to stop her forces. "Wolves," Legate said as she placed the infant in a pouch on her horse before reassuring the child she would return. "Prepare to fight," Legate said as she drew her sword, as did the other soldiers as they readied themselves for battle. As the soldiers trudged onward towards Fort Pale Pass, their footsteps muffled by the thick blanket of snow, a haunting chorus of howls pierced the stillness of the night air. Instantly, the Legionnaires tensed, their hands instinctively reaching for the hilts of their weapons. The soldiers formed a defensive circle, their backs pressed against one another as they scanned the darkness for signs of movement. The eerie wails grew closer, echoing off the sheer cliffs that loomed ominously above. But then, just as they braced themselves for the impending onslaught, a different sound cut through the night, a chorus of voices speaking in hushed tones that sent shivers down their spines. "The Thalmor," Legate whispered, her heart sinking as realization dawned upon her. "They found us." With renewed urgency, the soldiers tightened their formation, readying themselves for the inevitable confrontation. The Thalmor, agents of the Old Mary Dominion, were notorious for their ruthless tactics and unwavering devotion to their cause. As the enemy drew nearer, Leggett's mind raced with strategies, her determination unyielding despite the odds stacked against them. With a steely resolve, she rallied her comrades, their unity a beacon of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. But just as the tension reached its zenith, a lone figure emerged from the shadows, a Thalmor emissary, clad in robes of shimmering gold, flanked by a cadre of elven warriors. "Stand down, legionnaires," the emissary commanded, his voice ringing out with authority. "This is not a battle you can win." Leggett hesitated, her hand hovering over her weapon as she weighed their options. Though outnumbered and outmatched, she refused to back down, her loyalty to the Empire unwavering. "We will not yield to the likes of you," she declared, her voice resolute despite the tremor of fear that coursed through her veins. For a tense moment, the two sides faced off, the frigid air heavy with the weight of impending conflict. As the Thalmor emissary and his entourage confronted Leggett and her soldiers, amidst the chilling winds of the Skyrim night, the tension in the air crackled with uncertainty. With a regal air, the Thalmor leader stepped forward, his piercing gaze fixed upon Leggett. "What business brings the Imperial Legion to these remote reaches of Skyrim?" he inquired, his voice laced with thinly veiled disdain. Leggett stood tall, her resolve unyielding, despite the palpable hostility of the Thalmor emissary. "We are on a routine patrol, ensuring the safety of the Empire's borders," she replied evenly, her tone betraying none of the unease that churned within her. But before the standoff could escalate further, a sharp-eyed Thalmor soldier, his keen senses honed by years of training, noticed a subtle movement from the horse tethered nearby. With a swift motion, he approached the animal, his hand deftly reaching for the pouch strapped to its saddle. "What have we here?" the soldier murmured, his voice tinged with curiosity as he revealed the contents of the pouch to the group. To their astonishment, nestled within the folds of fabric lay the infant they had discovered earlier, his innocent features bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight. "The babe!" the Thalmor emissary exclaimed, his expression a mask of disbelief. "What madness is this?" Leggett's heart clenched with apprehension as she braced herself for the Thalmor's inevitable reaction. She knew all too well the hostility that existed between the Empire and the Aldmeri Dominion, and the discovery of the infant threatened to escalate the already precarious situation. But to her surprise, the Thalmor leader's demeanor softened, his gaze lingering on the child with a mixture of curiosity and intrigue. "It seems fate has thrown us an unexpected twist," the leader remarked, his voice betraying a hint of amusement. "What do you intend to do with the babe, legionnaire?" Leggett hesitated, her mind racing with possibilities. Though the infant's presence posed a complication to their mission, she couldn't bring herself to abandon him to the mercy of the Thalmor. "We will care for him," she declared, her voice steady despite the uncertainty that gnawed at her insides. "He is under the protection of the Imperial Legion now." As the Thalmor emissary regarded her with a contemplative gaze, Leggett steeled herself for whatever trials lay ahead. In the heart of Skyrim, amidst the bitter cold and looming shadows, the fate of the infant hung in the balance, his future entwined with the destiny of nations. The Thalmor emissary's gaze lingered upon the infant, his keen eyes studying the child's features with a mixture of curiosity and something akin to genuine concern. For a fleeting moment, the stern mask of authority softened, replaced by a rare glimpse of compassion. "It is not every day that we encounter such an anomaly," he mused, his voice tinged with a hint of fascination. "There is something peculiar about this child." Leggett tensed, her instincts warning her of the precariousness of their situation. She knew all too well the Thalmor's ruthless nature, their agenda shrouded in secrecy and ambition. Before she could formulate a response, however, the Thalmor emissary turned his piercing gaze towards her, his expression inscrutable. "And what, may I ask, led to the discovery of this child in your company?" he inquired, his tone deceptively mild. Leggett weighed her words carefully, acutely aware of the delicate balance of power that hung in the air. She knew that revealing the truth of how they had found the babe abandoned in the wilds of Skyrim could potentially jeopardize their mission and place them at the mercy of their Thalmor adversaries. "We encountered the child during our patrol," she replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil that churned within her. "He was alone, vulnerable. We could not simply leave him to perish in the cold." The Thalmor emissary regarded her with a skeptical eye, his scrutiny unwavering. "And yet, you expect us to believe that the Imperial Legion would willingly take in a foundling without question? Without any ulterior motives?" Leggett held his gaze, her resolve unyielding. "The Empire must protect its citizens, regardless of circumstance," she stated firmly, her voice echoing with conviction. "This child is under our care now, and we will ensure his safety." A tense silence settled over the group as the Thalmor emissary considered her words, his expression unreadable. Leggett braced herself for whatever judgment he might pass, as the Thalmor emissary's gaze remained fixed upon Leggett, his thoughts veiled behind a mask of calculated composure. After a prolonged moment of silence, he finally spoke, his voice measured and deliberate. "I see," he remarked, his tone betraying none of the thoughts swirling within his mind. "It seems the Empire has taken an unexpected interest in the welfare of this child." Leggett tensed, acutely aware of the implications of his words. She knew that the Thalmor's suspicions ran deep, their mistrust of the Empire ingrained in their very core. Our concern lies solely with the well-being of the innocent, she countered, her voice steady despite the undercurrent of tension that permeated the air. We seek no quarrel with the Dominion. The Thalmor emissary regarded her with a penetrating gaze, his scrutiny unyielding. Be that as it may, I trust you understand the gravity of the situation, he replied cryptically, his words laden with veiled warning. The Eldmeri Dominion does not take kindly to interference in its affairs. But the nod of acknowledgement, he turned away, his entourage falling into step behind him as they disappeared into the shadows, leaving Leged and her companions to ponder the implications of their encounter. As the echoes of the Thalmor's departure faded into the night, Leged felt a weight lift from her shoulders, though she knew that their troubles were far from over. With a heavy heart, she turned her attention to the infant cradled in her arms, his innocent face a beacon of hope amidst the uncertainty that lay ahead. We will protect you, little one, Leged whispered, her voice a solemn vow. No matter the cost. With resolve renewed, Leged and her fellow soldiers resumed their journey towards Fort Pale Pass, their thoughts consumed by the enigmatic child in their midst and the challenges that awaited them in the harsh wilderness of Skyrim. Little did they know, the discovery of the infant would set into motion a series of events that would shape the fate of the land and test the bonds of loyalty and courage in ways they could scarcely imagine. With newfound resolve, they continued their journey toward Fort Pale Pass, unaware that the future of Skyrim would be in the hands of the infant they had found. Fort Pale Pass. There, within the stone walls of Fort Pale Pass, the infant Issei found refuge, his fate intertwined with the destiny of the land itself. As they arrived at the stronghold, Leged wasted no time in seeking guidance from her commanding officer, Captain Tullius. Captain, we found this child out in the wilds, Leged explained, cradling the infant in her arms. We couldn't just leave him there. Captain Tullius regarded the babe with a furrowed brow, his gaze thoughtful as he considered their unexpected discovery. Very well, bring him inside. We'll see to it that he's cared for. And so, within the stone walls of Fort Pale Pass, the abandoned infant found refuge under the watchful eyes of the legionnaires. Leged gave her report as she reported that the Thalmor cornered them, but seemed to be interested in the infant for an unknown reason. So the Thalmor didn't kill you due to this child? Yes. I was honestly surprised to see that an infant of such strange origins was in the wilds of Skyrim, where any of the local inhabitants could have killed him. Leged said as she gently continued to comfort the boy in her arms. Tullius pondered the Thalmor's reasons since he hated the Thalmor, since he was well aware of their existence and goals, but seeing how the member of Thalmor chose to spare Leged and her soldiers because of an infant made him only more curious about the infant. Tullius looked at the infant and could tell that the child didn't seem to be a Nord, due to his hair and skin color being different from that of other Nord children he had seen before in the villages. The infant's eyes looked at Tullius as the child reached out and gripped the man's thumb, making the general chuckle at the boy as he then saw the boy's eyes, and to his surprise, the eyes of the boy resembled that of a dragon. Could he be the next one? Tullius pondered as the man then looked up at Leged and asked her. What will you do with the child? Tullius asked as he had a theory that the infant that Leged found was probably the turning point of the war that the Imperial Legion needed to kill Ulfric Stormcloak and the rebel forces finally. And if the supposed legendary warrior were indeed this child, then he'd become a great asset for Skyrim's future. While Tullius pondered what to do with the child, Leged couldn't help but notice something peculiar about the child as well that her general missed. There was a strange crimson energy that seemed to emanate from him, a power unlike anything she had encountered before. There's something unusual about this child. I've seen magic, but this is different. Stronger. More wild. Her words hung heavy in the air as she exchanged uneasy glances, uncertain of what to make of her discovery. Leged knew that if the Thalmor were interested in the boy, then she would be damned if she allowed an innocent child to be a pawn or victim to the Thalmor, much less the Stormcloaks. Tullius. I have a request that I wish to speak to you about. Leged said as Tullius turned around and saw her expression. Leged then gave her request. I wish to care for the child and raise him to become a man who will be able to help the Imperial Legion bring peace and justice to Skyrim, Leged said, saying that she may have only known the infant for a short time. Still, it was her maternal instincts that made her make this decision. Either way, Leged didn't care as she wished to help the child grow into a fine young man who would decide his fate and fight along the Imperial Legion as a general. Tullius pondered this request as he could see this being excellent for the Imperial Legion, since Leged was a Nord who believed the Stormcloaks were doing more harm than good, along with the fact she is a very loyal member of the Imperial Legion. Meaning this would be beneficial for the Imperial Legion, since if the child is truly the Dragonborn then having a mother such as Leged would be excellent in the long run. Very well, but do know that raising the child will be your responsibility since he will be your son, Tullius said as Leged smiled back at her commander. Do not worry. My work shall not be affected due to the child. Leggett said that as she then saw the small infant fall asleep in her arms, she pondered what his name should be before a name popped into her head. Issei. My honest soldier. That shall be your name. Leggett said as she then left Tullius, after he dismissed her, back to her home as she looked forward to the future of her new son that she shall raise to the best of her abilities while also trying to help the boy's power. Little did the people of Skyrim know, the arrival of the lost child marked the beginning of a journey that would test the very fabric of Skyrim's fate, and in the heart of the snowy wilderness, amidst the towering peaks and ancient ruins, the legend of the Dragonborn was about to be born anew. Interesting. This woman appears to be helping my host after some of my power changed his physical appearance, but what caused some of my power to affect the boy when he is too young to have awakened me? Drake asked himself as he pondered what this new land was that he and his host were in before the dragon smiled at the woman holding his host gently as a mother would, which made Drake feel nostalgic as Drake recalled his mother when he was a young hatchling. No matter. I shall continue to watch over my host and help him once he awakens me. Plus, I'm curious about the magic that is in the air of this strange new world. Drake Gotch, the red dragon of domination, said as he closed his eyes once more and began to slumber as he awaited for his host to summon his power. It was a wonderful morning in Fortitude, with the birds chirping, the giants walking around the land to squash any food, and even the soldiers preparing for morning training. Still, in the kingdom, there was one person who was excited for today, since this would be the day a special boy would be attending the school, where he would be able to become a true member of the Imperial Army. The brown-haired boy with tints of red yawned. The boy groaned before seeing the calendar and cheering in excitement. He quickly got dressed in his regular clothes for the big day before heading downstairs to see his mother, Ligatriki, cooking some breakfast. The woman smiled and turned around to see Issei with a smile on her face. Good morning, my son. Are you excited for today? Ligat asked, knowing her son was so excited that his left foot was thumping like a rabbit's foot before Issei smiled and nodded in response. You bet. Will Uncle Tullius be at the school for the orientation? I haven't seen him for a while now since he's been trying to hunt down the Stormcloaks. Issei asked, with Ligat smirking at her son's enthusiasm as she knew Issei wished to be a general just like Tullius but better, which made the old man snicker at the boy's dreams when Tullius said he was looking forward to seeing General Issei appear in the ranks of the Imperials. Ligat smiled at her son as he sat at the table and began to play with a small flame in his hand, amusing the woman since she was aware that Issei was very talented in both fire and lightning magic, but also wished to learn more magic. Don't worry, my little dragon, I'm sure Uncle Tullius will be indeed at the school for the orientation, for now. Let's eat breakfast, we can't have my little soldier go to school on an empty stomach. Ligat said as she finished making breakfast. She put it on a wooden plate and carried it to the dining table. She then put her son's breakfast in front of him and gently ruffled his hair as she sat down beside him. Both of them began eating their breakfast. After 15 minutes of eating breakfast and washing their hands, it was time to head to the academy. They got out of the home, and Ligat held Issei's hand before taking him to the academy as they walked in the street inside Solitude City. Who would have thought that me, Ligatriki, would become a mother to a child of unknown origins? Ligat said in her mind as she continued to walk next to her son, who was happy to see the shops opening up. He waved and said a good morning to the people of said establishments. Issei was a very happy child who always enjoyed putting a smile on other people's faces, which made him a bit popular among the citizens. Still, some did wonder why Ligat would take on a child, even though the rogue Nord was a member of the Imperial forces and proved herself by rising the ranks. Ligat paid them no mind since they didn't know Issei and herself, and she never really cared about ridiculous rumors. People wondered if Issei was possibly a Nord child, which is understandable, since the boy did have some facial features of a Nord. Still, there was something strange about his eyes that always interested Ligat, as if a beast was inside of Issei, just waiting to awaken from its slumber. Ligat asked Tullius if he knew anything about Issei's eyes, before the general told Tullius about his theory that the boy would be a big help in the future when he became a soldier and was trained and nurtured as a normal child. Although most children don't breathe fire from their mouths, sharp teeth that were similar to dragons, scales growing on his skin, or worse, when Issei was so scared, his eyes allowed him to see in the dark. Issei was also different from the other kids because he seemed to be a bit smarter and stronger than other children. This was proven when Issei launched a grown man in full armor across the streets of Solitude and ended up in a wall, leaving quite the imprint. Issei also seemed to learn differently from other children because he was more interested in magic and weapons. But it didn't matter to all, despite him being different, he was still her son. Adopted or not, she would be damned if something happened to her son, not that she is secretly proud of seeing her son launching a full-grown man in full armor across the street of Solitude and ending up in a wall with a visible imprint crater, absolutely not. It took 10 minutes of walking before they finally arrived at the academy and saw a few families with their kids standing in front of the big academy. Ah, Leggett. I'm glad you and Issei were able to make it. I was a bit worried Issei might have overslept, Talia said, patting Issei's head. The boy pouted at the gesture, making Leggett stifle a laugh in her mouth. Knowing Issei was very excited about the orientation, Issei was too excited to sleep before he tired himself out. Well, someone was very excited to meet his favorite uncle, which led to a certain someone wanting to become like said uncle, Leggett said as Issei's face turned red from embarrassment due to his mother's teasing. Before he smiled at his mother's kindness and warmth, Tullius led the two of them to a field where there were a couple of grown men in armor. At the same time, Issei saw some of the other kids whisper to each other, thinking Issei wouldn't be able to hear them. Hey, did you hear that Leggett's weird kid is here? Yeah. I'm surprised the Imperials would allow the Nord soldier to let that weirdo be here at this school. My dad says that Leggett was sleeping with Tullius and that's how she got her promotion instead of having battles like my old man. The kids continued to mock Issei and his mother, which made Issei narrow his eyes in a mixture of anger and annoyance until he blew some embers from his mouth. Still, before he could release a stream of fire on those brats, Leggett stopped him with a simple hand on his head and shook off her head. No. Do not allow yourself to succumb to their taunts. Do not give them ammunition to continue their ridiculous rumors. Leggett said in her head as her eyes conveyed the message, causing Issei to sigh, but not in response, while Tullius watched with amusement. Tullius was correct in having Leggett as his caretaker. It's alright, my little dragon. Just ignore those kids. They don't know anything about you or me. Plus, it's not worth it to have you set them on fire, Leggett said in a kind tone as she kneeled and cupped her son's cheeks while smiling, making him nod. She edged him on the forehead and stood up before patting his head gently. Then, she turned around to speak to her captain. So when will the orientation start? Leggett asked him. Welcome everyone to the orientation. Tullius started, and Leggett rolled her eyes at the theatrics the general used to scare the children. However, it had the opposite effect on Issei, who was smiling a large grin and excited as Tullius began to explain the orientation. The orientation shall have 3 parts, which will allow me and a few others to test your resolve and determine if you truly have what it takes to become a part of our school, become the next soldier to join the Imperials, and defend Skyrim from the Stormcloaks. Tullius said as the crowd erupted in cheers and booed the Stormcloaks before Tullius calmed them down. And now, the first part of the orientation shall be a physical exam, during which the children will face off against each other in armed combat. No magic is allowed in the battle. The victor decides whether to kill their opponent or force their opponent to surrender. This exam is to show if you truly are worthy and understand what it means to be part of the Imperial Army. Thalia said, with Issei excited as he was taken to his opponent, and it was one of the boys that mocked his mother earlier. Greg Seberg, the son of an army commander, was killed in swordplay. He was arrogant in his skills because he believed himself to be stronger among the children and couldn't believe Issei was able to send a grown man flying. This resulted in Issei not giving in to the boy's taunts and denying it because he said he didn't want to waste time on trivial things, such as dealing with weaklings. Greg is enraged by this and he tries to challenge Issei at every opportunity, but Issei either runs away after dodging Greg's attacks or merely uses magic to escape. Greg smirked at him before pointing a sword at him. Hey Nord, don't think you can run away to your mom. Issei didn't say anything, making Greg pissed before he hugged and walked toward the circle field. On the other hand, Issei grabbed a sword before his mother and uncle wished him good luck as he entered the circle field and stood in front of Greg. As the two boys look at each other, Greg has a smug cocky grin, as if he is very sure he is going to win, while Issei has a neutral look and remembers the lesson his mother taught him. In battle, always remain calm, no matter what kind of pressure you're under. You must not let your emotions control you. Refraining or panicking will only lead to your demise, defeat, or even death. That is the most important factor, so control your emotions and don't let the enemy's taunts provoke you. Second, in battle, you must first assess the situation and analyze your opponent. It is most important to make a strategy plan for defeating your opponent efficiently. Charging at the battle without a plan is asking for death. Third, always keep your guard up against any possible attacks, even surprise ones, and wait for the moment to strike back. Timing is an important factor in putting the enemy down once you take them down. Make sure the enemy doesn't have any surprise elements before finishing them off because if you don't, you will find yourself killed before you can react. Keep in mind not to be overconfident or cocky or arrogant, for it will bring a downfall to you. After remembering the important lessons, he slipped into his sword style. He held his sword hilt firmly with both hands, before he immediately started assessing the situation and analyzing his opponent Greg. Fighters. State your names. Tullia said as Greg went first. Greg Seberg. Issei. The referee acknowledged this as the match began with Greg yelling loudly as he charged towards Issei and clashed with Issei, who stayed on defense by blocking all sword strikes. Greg smiled at this as he began to taunt Issei. "Aw. What's the matter, Nord scum? Are you too scared to fight me?" Greg yelled as Issei didn't say a word, which only infuriated Greg some more, trying to strike or get a reaction from Issei, but the boy said nothing before being backed into a corner, which made Greg smirk, thinking he won the match until Issei spoke to him. "I'll admit you are good in combat, but..." Issei's eyes shined brightly as Issei's sword pushed Greg back from their lock. "Your weapon selection and tactics are the worst in the whole kingdom." Issei yelled, knocking Greg's sword from his hands before hitting him with a tackle that sent Greg fumbling to the ground. Issei stayed a few feet away from Greg, holding his sword at the ready. Issei's left foot was under Greg's blade before he picked it up and dual-wielded it. Greg growled at the boy for making a fool out of him before he pulled out a second sword from his back, which was a two-handed longsword, before he yelled and charged at Issei, who wasn't fazed by the new weapon, as he used his two swords to block the downward strike before Greg tried to kick Issei Spartan style. Still, Issei avoided this by leaping back and sending out a chain from his left sleeve, which wrapped Greg's hands together. Then, Issei pulled Greg towards him with tremendous force. Greg couldn't stop himself as Issei ran forward to the flying boy before sidelining him, causing Greg to fall to the ground until Issei kicked the longsword out of the way. Greg shakily got up after falling to the ground. He growled at Issei, who still had dual swords in his hands and a neutral look on his face. The boy immediately ran toward him and attempted to throw a punch. Issei casually sidestepped before tripping Greg on their leg, causing the boy to fall on the ground again before the brown red-haired boy looked at Greg. "You should give up now. You are now disarmed and have no weapon to defend yourself," Issei said to Greg, who growled in anger and furious after hearing what Nord scum said to him. "Do not disgrace yourself further, Greg. Learn to take defeat with some dignity. If I were truly a Nord working with the Stormcloaks, I wouldn't have let you live," Issei said as he sheathed his swords before sighing at Greg's annoyed face. "It's your choice whether you wish to become a real soldier or a stubborn mule who refuses to learn something and hides behind your father's name." Greg's eyes were on the ground, with Issei walking away from him before Greg yelled as he pulled out a dagger and rushed towards him with red in his eyes. "Damn you!" Greg shouted, with Issei merely stopping as he sighed and muttered under his breath. "You fool," Issei said as Greg passed Issei and was excited to see blood spilling in the air, but the excitement became shock as Issei didn't look fazed by the attack before Greg looked down at his left arm and saw his hand was missing before seeing Issei hold it on his sword that was stained with Greg's blood in hand. Issei didn't say anything else as he slashed the air with his sword, causing the blood to leave the blade along with the hand as it fell to Greg's side before Greg shouted into the air as he tried to stop the bleeding. At the same time, his mother came to his side and consoled her son before looking at Issei with rage in her eyes. "How could you do such a thing to a mere child? Is that the kind of soldier you wish to become?" the woman asked before Leggett stopped her from trying to scold her son. "Excuse me, but I'm afraid that your son is the one who is truly in trouble, since the referee said the match was over, but your son's foolish pride refused to accept defeat and tried to stab my son. Issei could have easily killed him but refused to stain his hands in your son's blood, so don't think you're in the right. Of course, you would defend that monster, he's your spawn, after all," the woman said in hateful scowl and scorn before grabbing her bleeding son Greg and taking him to the hospital, leaving Leggett to close her eyes. She took a deep breath before exhaling softly. She turned around and walked toward her son, patting his head. "You did well, just don't listen to that woman say what she said. I'm proud of you for winning the match," Leggett said kindly with a proud smile, making Issei smile happily. He hugged his mother's stomach, making her chuckle and pat her little dragon's head more. Hiatus smirked at the boy since the match ended with Issei as the victor. He would have to speak to Greg's father about his son's training, since it appeared that the boy needed a reality check in their world. "He's taken my lessons to heart, though I should have known since he is a Dragonborn," Hiatus said in his mind before the other matches ended before the group went from 32 to 16 members left as they moved to the second test. "This is a test of power. You will not be fighting another person, but instead, you will display what you're capable of with your magic. Be creative and show you can control your magic, since it will be very useful in combat when you are away from your weapon and cannot get it from the enemy." Hiatus said that as the 16 children began to try to show their magic, many of the candidates mostly went with either burning, electrocuting, or freezing a dummy with basic magic. There were a few exceptions, such as an elf girl who seemed to master fire and transformation magic when she turned into various forest critters and used fire to make the forms more intimidating. After the elf girl had shown her magic, it was Issei's turn. He walked forward before stopping in line 10 meters away from the dummy. He raised his hands, and suddenly, two fires swirled around before forming into fireballs and cupping together, creating a giant fireball. He immediately threw it at the dummy, causing a moderate fire explosion that scorched the dummy. He then spread his hands widely, and the sound of electricity crackled around his arms before a pure zigzag blue lightning-shaped spear appeared with crackling sounds. He immediately threw both lightning spears, causing a sound of lightning explosion, with smoke and dust surrounding the scorched dummy until it became visible. The dummy now had a giant hole on its stomach area and was heavily scorched, with smoke coming out of it. Hiatus was impressed since casting magic was one thing, but being able to shape magic like Issei did requires much training. However, he wasn't surprised since Issei loved to learn more about magic, which made him an odd one among the children since most of the time, he either trained outside the walls when his mother was gone to either perfect or create new techniques. Which resulted in Tullius and Legate making sure Issei had a supervisor babysitter when Legate was gone on a mission, which resulted in many soldiers painting on trying to keep with an eccentric child that loved to train with weapons and magic, along with reading the books Tullius gave him to enhance his brain better so Issei didn't become a meathead. Not bad. 8 shall move to the final test. This is a crucial task since the 8 chosen shall be given a familiar before the first day of classes, however, be aware that the beasts may not be accepting of you. But before we begin the third test, who can tell me what familiars are? Tullius asked before a random boy raised his hand. They're partners, right? I'm afraid you're wrong. They aren't your friends. They are beasts who can easily turn on you if you mistreat them and show no respect for them. Know that it's natural to feel fear for your familiars, but if you show respect and gain their respect, then they'll respect you. Now. Tullius shouted as the massive door behind them opened, with soldiers standing guard. Choose wisely, or else you'll die. The remaining 8 children nodded as they went inside the massive doors. They saw many animals, including dogs, cats, spiders, and horses, but some unique ones, such as a strange snake that seemed to ignore the children. Many of them avoided the snake because they did not want to get bitten by it. All except one child, who looked at the snake in awe before approaching it. The snake was a very long snake with its scales shimmering in the light that penetrated the walls and windows, as its dark green color complemented its eyes, which may look lazy, but was wary of those around him. The snake was surprised to see a child approaching it inside of its cage, but what shocked the snake more were the eyes that the boy had within him. Unlike the other humans that the snake had seen during its imprisonment, the serpent had never seen a person with snake-like eyes that seemed to look at them in amazement instead, before the eyes had a hint of curiosity as the boy then placed a hand on the tank and spoke to the serpent. Do you wish to be free? 6 simple words shocked the snake as it looked into the boy's eyes for any form of deceit. Still, the snake saw nothing but honesty and concern, as the boy seemed to have a sad expression in his eyes, as if he could understand the snake's pain of being imprisoned in a cage and taken away from its home. The snake nodded its head before speaking to him with a unique gift it obtained from its mother. Yes. I desire to be free from this cage, but are you asking me to become your familiar or a mere pet? The serpent asked, unsure if the boy in front of it could hear its thoughts before a reply came to it. Yes. I wish to set you free since I can tell you've been here a long time. Issei said as he gently reached into the cage, causing the snake's eyes to widen, then placed his left hand on the snake and gently caressed the scales on its body, shocking the serpent with the gentleness in the boy's hands, before the snake looked at the boy's eyes once more and saw something else in them. The boy's eyes seemed to contain something else in them. It was as if the boy was a container for a powerful dragon inside of him, unaware of the existence of the dragon itself. The snake hissed in relief and then decided to follow this boy after hearing and seeing his eyes and soul. Child. I wish to form a contract with you. The serpent said, surprising Issei before he asked if they were okay with being a familiar, to which the serpent chuckled in amusement. Yes, but may I have your name first? The serpent asked. Issei nodded and replied to the request. Issei, Isseiriki. May I have your name as well? Issei asked, making the serpent smile, knowing they had made the right choice to follow this boy. My mother was called a basilisk by your kind, but the name my mother blessed me with was Medusa, after the memory of my grandmother who created my mother. Medusa said before Issei's hand, then moved from the scales to her head and closed his eyes as he recalled reading up about familiar pacts. A familiar pact was similar to a contract that forest elves made with either animals they tamed or vampires from the past when they recruited servants to join them, but the difference with the contract that Issei was performing benefited both sides. I, Isseiriki, ask for Medusa, the basilisk, to accept this contract and become my partner, Issei asked as his hand on her head began to shine brightly with a mark of a dragon on it, causing the animals to cause a bit of a stir. In contrast, the others were amazed by what was happening, especially the elf earlier, as she had already chosen the frost spider to become her familiar. Did he really make a contract with the basilisk child? The dark elf asked, her eyes widening in shock as a bright light flashed before their eyes, until the light died to see that the basilisk had now coiled around Issei and stared into his eyes before smiling at him, before the snake placed her head on Issei's head. The two were silent as they left the chamber, with the dark elf following after him with her frost spider, amazed that the strange Nord she was told about had made contact with the basilisk's child. Amazing. To think Issei was able to obtain the child of the basilisk. The dark elf said, running to catch up with him because her mind and heart were telling her to follow the boy. The elf didn't know why, but something told her that if she followed the boy, she'd be able to achieve great power to avenge the death of her mother. When I call your name, come forward, Talia said before looking at the eight who passed. Issei and the dark elf were both silent, while Legatriki smiled at her son, proud but amazed by her son having such a special familiarity. However, the training will be difficult to control the basilisk, since there are few left. They were well known for their acidic venom, as well as their petrifying gaze. Still, the serpent seemed to be content with Issei's presence, as it seemed to wrap around Issei's body, which reminded Legat when she comforted Issei when he cried in his sleep, sometimes due to the rudeness of the other children, hurting him for being different from the others. Balara Shadowiver, Talia said before the dark elf approached and accepted the badge to enter the school. Then, Tullius called for Issei to come forward. Congratulations, Issei. I'm sure your mother is proud of you. Tullius said, with Issei smiling in gratitude as he accepted the badge to enter the school before Tullius stood back and looked at all eight of them. Children. Tullius roared as the students were standing at attention before he continued. You eight have been given the opportunity to not only enter the Imperial Academy. Who you are, your titles or ranks, mean nothing in those walls. At the academy, you will learn how to work with others as part of a team due to your special talents, but know that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Tomorrow, you begin your new life as a future member of the Imperial Army. You are dismissed. Yes sir. The children shouted, making Tullius smile at them before letting them return to their parents. These children are the future of not just the Imperial Army, but also the land of Skyrim. Now, let us celebrate our newest students. Tullius said as the parents cheered before Thalara walked up to Issei and smiled at him. Hello there, Thalara said, with Issei looking around for anyone that the girl was talking to before pointing to himself, causing the dark elf to let out a giggle before she nodded. Of course. I'm speaking to you. My name is Thalara Shadowiver. May I have your name? Thalara asked, even though she already knew his name from the other children. Issei. Isseiriki. Issei said as he was nervous and wondering what this girl was doing while talking to him. Legat was happy but worried for her son, since someone seemed to have taken an interest in him, but Issei was shaking like a bunny and scared. Excuse me, Thalara, but would you like to join us for lunch? Legat asked. Issei was shocked by the invitation, but Thalara accepted it and took Issei's hand before they headed to the buffet table. Issei was a bit embarrassed by this, while Legat was chuckling at her son's expression, because he did not have any friends. Hopefully, that'll be good for Issei since I was worried he wouldn't be able to make friends, Legat said, heading over to her son and his friend. The two continued their conversation, with Thalara asking how Issei was able to tame the basilisk. Issei was stuttering his responses, but the dark elf was patient when waiting for the responses. However, while the two were enjoying the festivities, one of the adults didn't seem interested in the festivities, but instead was looking at Issei and Legat, as well as Thalara. I have to tell my superiors about this. They said in their mind before leaving the area without making a scene and headed to a dark alley before they took the hood off to reveal a Kadget's head. So the child all those years ago is now entering the academy. This'll make watching him easier, the Kadget said before leaving the city to report to his superior. For some reason, he stumbled on his feet, feeling fatigued by dizziness, and began to cough up blood, shocking the Kadget. He then looked at his left paw and saw that there was some blood leaking from it. The Kadget sliced off the fur with a dagger to see that a snake bit him. But when did it, Kadget said as his mind recalled greeting Issei after he registered his basilisk, only for the snake to bite him playfully and not use its fangs. However, the snake was a lot more clever than he thought. His vision began to darken while he continued to cough, stumbling on the dirt path until he fell into a grassy area and struggled to breathe before recalling one more thing he had forgotten about the snake. The eyes of the serpent staring into his own before the bite. Damn it. Forgive me, my lord. Forgive this fool who the snake deceived. Kadget said as his vision became darkness before his paws fell to the side. Later. As the festivities winded down, Issei and Thalara continued their conversation over lunch, while Legat observed them with a smile, relieved to see her son making a friend. Issei, although still a bit nervous, gradually opened up to Thalara, sharing stories about his upbringing and his aspirations to become a great soldier like his uncle Tullius. Meanwhile, Tullius conversed with the other instructors and parents, discussing the upcoming challenges and opportunities for the recruits. The atmosphere was filled with a sense of hope and determination as everyone looked forward to the future of the Imperial Army. After the festivities, Issei and Thalara finished their meal, promising to meet again before the start of classes. Issei felt a newfound sense of confidence and excitement for the journey ahead, knowing that he had a friend by his side and a friendly but wise familiar watching over him. As the day came to a close, Issei and Leggett returned home, ready to rest and prepare for the challenges that awaited them. "Hey, Mom, I'm really glad that Thalara spoke to me," Issei said as he was in his pajamas before looking at his mother and asking. "But are you okay with Thalara? I know you've been protective of me because of the other kids picking on me and how they mock you for being a Nord despite all you have done for the Imperial Army." Issei didn't want his mother to worry about him since he enjoyed speaking to Thalara, but he worried about his mother because many kids acted nice to him, only to be rude to him later on in some sick prank. Leggett smiled warmly at her son, brushing his hair gently. "I'm happy for you, Issei. Thalara seems like a kind and genuine friend." She paused, considering his concern. "As for me, don't worry about what others say. I've faced far worse than petty gossip." She reached out to cup his cheek. "Focus on your friendships and your training. That's what truly matters." Issei nodded, feeling reassured by his mother's words. With a content sigh, he settled into bed, ready to face whatever challenges awaited him in the days ahead. "Thanks, Mom. I love you." "I love you more, my little dragon warrior," Leggett said, making Issei laugh at the nickname before she left Issei alone with Medusa. The basilisk snuggled with Issei as if she were his personal guard dog. Issei smiled at the protective side of his family before hugging Medusa's head in his arms. "Good night, Medusa. Let's work hard and become even better than the generals of the Imperial Army," Issei said as Medusa smiled at the declaration before the boy fell asleep in bed. Medusa made sure they were truly alone before gaining a humanoid form. However, her tail was still there and she gently used her fingers to pet the boy's hair before humming to herself. "Sleep, little hatchling. Sleep and enjoy the night while your partner protects you from those who wish to harm you," Medusa said in their mental link before she fell asleep and made a personal promise to protect this boy and help him in his path. Meanwhile, Thalara was prepping for tomorrow as she was grateful to have met Issei. Still, she took a look at her bow and recalled her mother giving this to her on the day Thalmor made a dark elf swear to hunt down the ones who killed her mother and make them suffer for what they've done to her. "Once I find you, High Elf, I'll make sure to take out the other eye when I kill you and avenge my mother," Thalara said as her crimson eyes glowed brightly in the dark. A swirl of dark magic formed around her body, just itching to be let loose. Two unlikely friends have become comrades and will face the challenges ahead together, each with their own goals and motivations driving them forward. Issei, with his desire to become a great soldier like his uncle Tullius and Thalara, while Thalara seeks vengeance for her mother's death at the hands of Thalmor. As they embark on their journey at the Imperial Academy, they'll learn the true meaning of friendship, courage, and determination. With Issei's unique abilities and his loyal familiar, Medusa, by his side, and Thalara's determination and proficiency with dark magic and archery, they'll face whatever obstacles come their way with strength and resilience. And with Leggett's unwavering support and love, Issei will continue to grow into the formidable soldier he aspires to be. As they prepare for the challenges ahead, they'll forge bonds, overcome trials, and perhaps uncover secrets that will shape their destinies. Together, they'll navigate the complexities of the Imperial Army, facing both external threats and internal conflicts, all while striving to make their mark on the world. The journey of Issei and Thalara Shadowweaver is just beginning, and the adventures that await them will test their resolve, challenge their beliefs, and ultimately define who they are destined to become. But one thing is certain. With their friendship and determination, they'll overcome any obstacle and emerge stronger than ever before. "Ha!" A 16-year-old Issei yelled as he pushed back his instructor with his longsword before blowing a stream of fire out his mouth, causing the instructor to switch to using magic before he could release an ice spell to dispel the flames heading his way. "Oh no, you don't." A 16-year-old dark elf shouted as she then fired a steel bolt from her crossbow and hit the hand, forcing the instructor to pull his hand back before the flames hit his body. The instructor then rolled on the ground a bit before slowly standing back up and cracking his neck while eyeing his two top students, who were the best in their classes. Issei is a skilled fighter and magic user who shouldn't be underestimated in combat due to his resilience, ability to adapt to different fighting styles, and ability to strategize with his teammates. Issei learned that there was so much more to learn about magic, so when he was studying magic almost every night in the library, the school allowed Issei to enter a higher class, where Issei was able to learn better how to not only control magic, but also shape it, after General Lucius informed the magic teachers of Issei's skills in magic. Issei also enjoyed learning about the kingdom's history and the many different relics that were lost to Skyrim. The Stormcloaks had unexplained power that was not to be underestimated. In the wrong hands, it would spell destruction for Skyrim's future, which is why Issei made a vow to ensure that the Stormcloaks would never abuse their powers. Outside of his academics and training, Issei didn't have very many friends, but a small handful of them. His best friend was Medusa, his basilisk. Medusa was very protective of Issei, but the serpent was very kind to Issei, and vice versa. The two were thick as thieves and worked together when they were researching, training, or even relaxing. The basilisk was now as tall as Issei and could become a humanoid creature, since Medusa's mother could become a hybrid or use a human form to walk among humans outside of the water. Medusa's training was difficult since the basilisk was protective of Issei due to the bullying from other kids. However, Valara Shadowweaver, Issei's second best friend, was able to earn the serpent's trust, resulting in the two forming a pact to protect and help Issei. Valara Shadowweaver, on the other hand, was more social than Issei, but added academics that didn't involve fighting, so Issei helped tutor her when it came to history lessons, strategizing, and taking care of her baby demon frost spider, Breeze. Valara was an excellent warrior who loved to use long-range weapons such as spears, arrows, and throwing daggers. When her enemies got too close for her to use her arrows and daggers, she was good at close range with a short sword. However, Issei was the better fighter at close range, so the two helped each other's fighting styles. The Dark Elf was even able to control her transformation magic better, as well as her fire. Still, Issei was surprised to learn that Valara was able to transform thanks to her mother being a forest elf, which explained her resonance with animals. Her control over fire magic, on the other hand, was amazing. However, she performed better when using her transformation magic with fire magic, so Issei was able to teach her some tricks to use fire magic without transforming into her various beast forms. Their relationship actually grew since the two were roommates. Granted, there were a few complications, such as one being a boy and the other a girl, as well as some funny stories, like the time they both hit puberty and Issei sought Lara's everything, which resulted in Issei having a black eye for a week. Now, as for the frost spider, Breeze was actually very shy around others. This was actually due to the spider being part demon spider, an extremely rare type of spider that is said to be extinct, and part frost spider. The spider was sneaky, able to move around undetected and make sticky webs to trap its prey or Thalara's targets. The demon spider side actually gave Breeze extremely thick webbing that could be used as a substitute for rope should Breeze reach adulthood. The four of them were a small group that most people avoided. They were labeled the oddball group because they were very different from the other students attending the academy. However, both of them were fine with the names and such since they only needed each other. The instructor smiled as he then called out to his students. "That's enough. You both have passed the second part of your exam," the instructor said, causing both Issei and Thalara to rest their body and weapons, while Medusa and Breeze rushed over to them and tended to them. "Are you alright, master?" Medusa asked as she offered Issei some water, which he thanked her for before drinking half of it. Then, he offered it to Thalara, who thanked him before chugging the last of the water, while Breeze used its frost powers to cool her muscles. "I am now that I got some water. Thanks, Medusa. Sorry, we couldn't have you or Breeze fight with us," Issei said since both Issei and Thalara were told they couldn't use their familiars in the exam, which made them sad but grateful that both Medusa and Breeze understood the reason why they couldn't fight with their masters. "It's not a problem. We understood that it was so that your instructor could gauge your abilities without us there to support you," Medusa said as their instructor walked back towards them. "The two of you have passed the second part of your exam, meaning you only have one exam to take. Report to the training area where you'll be given your final test, but you can bring your familiars with you this time," their instructor said before both Issei and Thalara left with their families. The instructor waited for them to leave the area before pulling out a piece of paper from his desk and beginning to write on it. "General Tullius. Your suspicions about Issei Hiatus being the next Dragonborn are coming to light since the boy has exceeded in control over fire, lightning, ice, and a few restoration spells. The basilisk is helping in the latter category since the basilisk is helping his immunity to different poisons due to the serpent biting him all the time. His partner, Valara, seems to be growing more resistant to illusion spells. She has mastered her transformation abilities as well as restoration and alteration spells. Her fire magic has become more controlled, but her firepower has grown as well, thanks to the future Dragonborn. There is a rumor that the two are dating, but they seem to act as friends, though the Dark Elf seems to be hiding a mark around her bust, according to the rumors from the other students. Still, if Issei is indeed the Dragonborn, then this final exam should be able to help him unlock his powers. From the Imperial Academy. The instructor rolled it up and gave it to a hawk, who took the note and flew into the sky toward the recipient. If the boy really is the Dragonborn, then Skyrim can be saved from the Stormcloaks, but if they try to approach the boy, I fear they will try to bring him over to their side. The instructor, Captain Alistair, pondered as he recalled the time that Legatriki had to deal with the Stormcloaks, trying to steal her son when he was a young boy, when they saw the boy's skills with fire magic. Needless to say, Basilisk and Legate killed the fools. This confirmed the old saying he'd heard from many of the other captains and generals. Never underestimate a mama bear protecting her cub. Alistair could only feel pity for the Stormcloaks once they saw the Dragonborn on not just the Imperial side, but also ending the war with Ulfric Stormcloak dead for his betrayal. And now, back to the deadly duo. So what do you think the final exam is for Thalara? Issei asked his girlfriend, who smiled at her boyfriend before replying to him. From what I've heard in the grapevine, the final exam is supposed to test our skills before we can become official members of the Imperial Army, Thalara explained since she was curious about it. From what she gathered, the first two parts of the exam were easy for them both, since Issei was excellent when it came to book smarts and combat, but his social skills needed to improve. People tended to avoid him as a child, except for her. As for the combat trial, Thalara was excited the most about it, since she was able to enjoy the fun of facing a more experienced fighter than her classmates, who were honestly boring, since many of them boasted about their families and their wealth, which they thought would get them far in the ranks after graduating, but the Imperial Academy took care of them by expelling them from the academy. Well, either way, at least we'll be able to do it together, since it's nice actually having someone willing to talk to me, and not just insult me like those other nobles, Issei said as Medusa giggled at her master's comment about the nobles. Issei wasn't such a fan of noble people who bragged about their accomplishments, because that led to arrogance, which led to death on the battlefield. Many of the nobles that attended the academy were either trying to buy their way through the Imperial Academy, or mocking those beneath them, due to their lack of education. Issei didn't care about them since he just scared them, or Medusa did when they tried to force Issei into fighting them, or trying to humiliate him, which didn't work since Medusa was not to be underestimated when it comes to pranks traps, since she was good at disarming them before her master stepped in them. Eventually, the four of them made it to where Captain Belius, an Imperial captain who wasn't such a fan of the High Elves due to Thalmor. Granted, he had no hatred for the Dark Elves or Forest Elves, but he still had some resentment towards the High Elves for what they did to him and his men when he was a lieutenant before his demotion. Ah. Ricky. Shadover. Glad to see you two made it. Belia said to them before they noticed that they were the only ones. Wait, is it just us four? Where are the others? Issei asked before Belia spoke to them. You two have shown that you're far more skilled than your other classmates, which is why your final exam will be a mission. You'll be attacking a Stormcloak base and retrieving the artifact that they found before they attempt to use it against us. I'll be joining you both to grade your progress along with a small group of my choosing. Belia said as he then led the two of them to a small group of 10 people who were wearing Imperial armor. Issei recognized some of the soldiers as their classmates, but before he could ask Belius about the mission or their classmates, the instructor began speaking to the group. Listen up. Belius shouted as the group saluted the captain before Belius continued. For the final exam, these will be your leaders. You are to follow their orders to the letter without question. Now, your commander will speak to you all. Belius then turned to the side as Issei walked forward and spoke to the group, who seemed unsure of his skills as a commander, before Issei took a deep breath and began. Listen up. Issei shouted with a strong voice that shocked the group, especially Thalara. She recognized this as Issei's general voice which he used to speak with authority, which really made her feel like she had to listen to him. I understand that many of you do not trust me or Thalara. I don't blame you for thinking either of us is unfit for the position of commander, but this is not only our chance to put our knowledge to good use, but also to show the Stormcloaks that they should fear and respect us. I know many of you are sick and tired of others calling you lazy nobles who do nothing but wait for everything to be served to you, but I've watched all of you defeat all the challenges that came your way. You are all fighters who wish to bring honor not just to your families but to yourself, so I ask you all to fight alongside me and show the Stormcloaks no mercy. For the Imperial Army. Issei shouted with Thalara, and half of the troops shouted with him. The others were silent but nodded in agreement with Issei's words as they lifted their swords, maces, and spears. Belius was impressed by Issei's speech before noticing that the boy was shaking a bit, which made the captain chuckle at the boy. I don't blame the kid for being scared of their reaction. It's just like me when I served with Tullius back when he was a captain. Belia said before the group began to head to their final exam location where they would run down the Stormcloaks. Issei and Thalara were nervous as they were preparing with their group. Their soldiers consisted of 2 warriors, 4 archers, and 4 casters. Medusa and Breeze were excellent in surveillance, while Issei and Thalara were able to take on a small army. So our final exam is a legit mission. According to Belius, the location was a camp near Dunsted Grove. It's where a small group of the Stormcloaks is awaiting transportation to slip past the security checkpoints so they can enter Whiteburn with no issues. However, we'll be ambushing them first before their transport arrives, so we can secure the relic and possibly some information from any prisoners. Issei said in his mind while looking at the group resting in the cart while Thalara was taking a short nap, leaving only Issei and Belius awake. Issei then looked at his instructor for the exam before asking. "Tell me, why did you and the academy decide that Thalara and I would be the leaders on this mission?" Issei asked with a curious tone before Belius replied. "It's because your mother and General Tullius believe that the two of you should be made captain if you are successful on the exam. This is to test you both on leading a group under your command." Belia said that the Dragonborn and Dark Elf were surprised that the highest-ranked members of the Imperial Army believed that they could be made captains should they succeed in their mission. Issei thanked him after Belius told him to watch over the group. Issei did this while looking at the files to prepare for the upcoming battle and smiling at Medusa and Breeze cuddling next to Thalara. It would be a while until the mission began, so Issei continued to watch over his group. Meanwhile, at the Stormcloaks base. It was a cold and blistering night, with the wind making the Stormcloaks on the watch even colder, even though they had a fire to keep them warm. Shit. Why are we freezing our asses off out here instead of inside where it's warm? One of the archers asked while shivering with icicles forming from his nose. The other archer next to him was shivering a bit before replying to his partner. "Look. I'm freezing too, but someone has to look out for the Imperials if they ever catch up to us. We only have a small group because getting this staff was a pain in the ass, since we lost half our forces getting it from that Solitude was transporting to the academy. Well, it won't do us any good, since that stupid stick isn't even that powerful. Don't underestimate the power of the Wabbajack. The hands made it of the chaotic gods. Who knows what powers it has that can benefit the Stormcloaks and Ulfric's goals. TCH. If only we didn't have to leave the staff to that stupid bitch. Watch your tongue. She's our caster and important to this operation. Show her some respect." "Respect? I'd rather trust one of those lizards, pigs, or pointy ears, rather than that one of Nord." The archer said something unknown to the listener in the conversation. "As if you would ever trust someone else that isn't a Nord," said one of Nord under her breath as she then looked at the Wabbajack in her hands before the staff burned her hands, forcing her to throw it away from her body. The one of Nord was Freya Stormcaller, a 15-year-old talented Nord caster who worked with the Stormcloaks. Freya had striking ice blue eyes and long flowing blonde hair that she often tied back to keep out of her face during spell casting. She has a fair complexion and stands tall and proud. She bore the physical traits typical of her Nord heritage, with a strong, athletic build. Born and raised in Windhelm, Freya grew up immersed in the proud Nord culture and traditions. From a young age, she displayed a natural talent for magic, particularly in the School of Destruction and Restoration. However, she preferred the latter since she underwent training to be an assassin when infiltrating other camps to gather intel. Despite her aptitude for the arcane arts, she often found herself at odds with her fellow Nords due to her more inclusive views and disdain for the Stormcloak movement. Freya's experiences with discrimination and bigotry within the Stormcloak ranks have left her disillusioned and disheartened. Witnessing firsthand the harsh racism and xenophobia of her fellow Nords, she feels increasingly alienated and conflicted. No longer able to disregard the injustices committed in the name of nationalism, Freya desires to defect from the Stormcloaks and seek a path of her own, one that aligns with her principles of equality and acceptance. However, she also hears about the Imperials and how they welcome the other species to their side. Even Nord, such as Ligatriki, was on their side and was not such a fan of Ulfric Stormcloak's actions or ideals. Freya was hoping to harness the Wabbajack to use on her comrades and show the Imperials that she wished to join their cause. However, the staff seemed to reject her until she saw the writing that only one blessed by the Daedric Prince could use it, which made her plans take a bit of a break. Freya could have used her assassination skills to kill them, but they were too grouped. Granted, she does have skills in hand-to-hand combat, but even she couldn't take on a large group of 20 people even if they only had 4 archers, 1 caster, which was her, and 15 warriors. "It'll take a miracle to get them out of this place," Freya said as she began thinking of a plan. The sound of yelling penetrated the air, and 2 of the archers standing guard yelled as they were killed by a serpent appearing behind the wall and a frost spider riding on its shoulder. The other archers tried to shoot the snake and spider, but the spider spins a web in their faces, blinding the archers. Meanwhile, the serpent pounced on the first one and sank her fangs into them, silencing them before ripping their heads off for good measure. The 4th archer was blinded, but instead, his hand and bow were stuck to the wall where he was positioned as the spider rushed towards him and crawled on his arm before biting it, causing the man almost to let out a yell, but was stopped by the spider, shooting a ball of web into his mouth, choking the archer. Before the spider moved up to the man's neck and seemed to rub its front legs together before biting into his neck, causing the poison to kill him instantly. The frost spider and a snake. Here? Freya asked as the frost spider bit them for good measure. The snake seemed to be waving a red flag of sorts in its teeth until a sound reached Freya's ears. It was the familiar sound of magic and arrows hurtling in the air. Freya then saw the snake and spider vanish from the wall, as if they were teleported before Freya looked to see that fireballs and lightning spells rained from the skies above them, along with arrows enchanted by casters no less. "Everyone, we need to run," Freya shouted as she leaped off the top of the fort and fell to the ground. The Stormcloaks were shouting as they were forced to flee from the protection of their fort, which was exactly what the Imperials wanted. "What the hell was that? Where did that rain come from?" the commander asked before a voice responded to him. "Oh, that was us. We knew that charging into the fort would give you the advantage, but after looking at the building prints of the fort, it was easy to figure out that the structure of said fort was so weak that a rain of fire and lightning would force the rats to escape the dangers of the rain. The arrows were just added for some flair." The voice of Issei Hiatus said as he walked towards the group of the 15 soldiers along with Alara and the 2 warriors, who seemed to be protecting the casters and archers of their group. Freya then felt her body freeze as she recognized Issei from the reports her commander gave her for future potential threats. There's no way. A Nord that has the eyes of a dragon and tints of red, as if a fire would rise from within, and at his side is a dark elf that is a master of the destruction arts and transformation magic. A deadly strategist and future leader, along with a deadly archer who commands both a deadly frost spider and a basilisk. Issei and Thalara Shadowiver. Freya shouted in her mind, knowing they were trapped and couldn't escape since she had figured out his plan while the fort burned to ash behind them. Issei knew that the group would be troublesome to attack if they went into the fort because the Stormcloaks may have mapped out the area for possible advantage points, plus, they lacked warriors and only had far-ranged fighters, meaning they had to play it smart. Issei had Medusa and Breeze scout the fort earlier before they arrived, letting the horses rest until they returned and informing them of the cold getting to them. The caster with Wabajak was inside the fort with the other warriors and commander, while 4 archers were on top of the fort to alert and defend the Stormcloaks. The infiltration was a success. Issei then informed the group of the information given to him by their familiars before explaining the plan. They would take out the archers first, so they wouldn't be alarmed before raining hell upon the fort to flush the rebels out. The plan worked perfectly. The warriors were scared and freezing, while the Imperials were well rested and ready to go to town with the rebels. "I already know your response to this question, but I'll ask it anyway as a courtesy," Issei said before speaking to the Stormcloaks. "Surrender yourselves to the Imperial army and your lives will be spared. But if you refuse, then I hope you said your prayers since you'll soon join the other rebels in death." The commander growled as he drew his sword and shouted at Issei, "We, the Stormcloaks, refuse to bow our heads to your slaughters. We will free Skyrim from your reign of terror, and if we die, we'll help our Nord brothers and sisters in death." Issei sighed as he cracked his neck before signaling the archers and casters to hold off their efforts. "You have such spirit. Tell me your name." "I am Commander Beowulf. And I will be your executioner." Beowulf shouted as Issei nodded in response before looking at Freya, who seemed to be shaking in fear as his gaze met her own. "And you are?" Freya Stormcaller." Freya stuttered before Issei noticed Wabajak in her hands as he then looked back at Beowulf. "I propose a challenge, you and one of your strongest warriors versus Thalara and I. If we win, the rest of you will surrender, but if you win, then you and your group will be free. How's that sound?" Issei asked, with Belius intrigued by the challenge before Beowulf smirked and nodded. "I accept it. And my strongest is actually an old friend of the Imperial army. Meet Greg Seberg," Beowulf said as Greg smirked while walking towards Issei. "I've been waiting 6 years to have a second shot at killing you, and now you'll die by my hands," Greg said as his eyes burned like coals in a fire, while Issei yawned at the attempt to taunt him before Issei looked at Thalara. "Deal with the commander. It's time I put the dog down for good," Issei said. Thalara giggled at the comment, making Greg glare even more at Issei's response. "Dog? I'll show you who's a real dog," Greg yelled as he tried to lop off Issei's head with his longsword, but Issei merely blocked it with his armored gauntlet, shocking Greg as Issei smiled at his opponent's reaction. "Like my gauntlet? I thought it suited my armor," Issei said as he looked at the crimson gauntlet that had appeared on his left arm that he had awakened for 3 years. The gauntlet was a bit clunky, but Issei made it work for him by protecting his left arm and blocking heavy attacks. The longsword barely left even a scratch on the gauntlet. Greg tried to pull his sword away, but the gauntlet caught the blade. Then, Issei had a chain fall from his right arm and sent it towards Greg, who moved his free arm away, but the arm wasn't Issei's target. Instead, the chain wrapped around Greg's left leg before Issei pulled it, forcing Greg on his back and letting go of the sword. Issei then threw the sword at an attacking warrior from the Stormcloaks, before it not only pierced the armor and heart, but sent the dead Stormcloak into a tree. Beowulf and Frey were shocked by this, while Thalara laughed at how Issei dealt with the idiot who tried to harm him with a sneak attack. Anyone else wish to interfere with our fight? Issei asked, with the remaining 12 looking afraid before two brave soldiers tried to aid Greg. Still, all that resulted was the two being struck by a deadly ice and lightning spell, making Issei look at the two casters whose hands sizzled with magic before Issei thanked the two of them. "Thank you," Issei said with a grateful smile. He looked at Greg, who was back on his feet, before he tried to punch Issei with what looked like a metal arm. "Damn you, Issei." Greg yelled before Issei merely smirked at the angry traitor. "Still weak," Issei said as he passed Greg with a brandished short sword, causing Greg to flash back to the time he lost his hand before seeing his new arm destroyed. Greg looked at his ruined arm in shock before he looked back and saw Issei aim a lightning dragon at him. "Your death will serve the Imperials well. You should take comfort in that," Issei said before releasing his spell. "Chain Dragon Lightning," Issei muttered as the dragon destroyed 3 more warriors who tried to defend Greg with their shields. The lightning destroyed both the shields and people before Greg screamed to the heavens as the lightning fried him alive. His screams scarred the remaining Stormcloaks, and the Imperials were amazed by the power behind such a spell. Issei then lowered his right arm before seeing Valara play with her opponents. She weaved around the sword swings from Beowulf, striking him with a poison-tipped arrow and a blind spot before dodging more attacks from the slowly dying opponent. "Valara, stop playing with your food and finish Beowulf already. He's an honorable warrior, so give him a swift ending," Issei shouted, making Valara pout before she smiled and replied. "Of course, Issei," Valara said as she then leaped back a few more feet before taking a deep breath and releasing a breath of dark red flames, burning Beowulf's left arm before the flames extended to his upper torso and killing the man in flames. Valara smiled as she could smell the flames and cooked meat while Freya looked at them in shock and fear. Only the two of them took down the commander and Greg, the strongest of their group. No way. The reports about them don't do them justice. These two are on a whole other level," Freya said before Issei looked at the remaining 7 soldiers and Freya before asking them. "Your commander is dead, as is your strongest soldier and a few more of your brothers and sisters, but I'll extend the offer once more. Surrender, and you'll be spared. What is better? A meaningless death or living to fight another day?" Issei asked, his body being shown by the moonlight and fire around them before the group surrendered their weapons and shields. At the same time, Valara grabbed Wabajak from Freya and examined it before giving it to Issei. "The artifact has been retrieved, but it doesn't seem to be awakened," Valara said as Issei inspected it before seeing the gauntlet he had on his left arm resonate with the artifact. The Wabajak seemed to shake before a bright light left the gauntlet and the Wabajak then appeared to be bonded to it. What in Skyrim just happened? Issei asked himself, not even aware that the gauntlet could do such a thing. Before he could answer, Valara pinned Freya to the snowy ground, glaring at her with rage. "What sorcery did you do to Issei? Answer me before I gut you like a pig," Valara shouted in rage until Belia stopped her from killing Freya. "Wait. We'll deal with the gauntlet later. Right now, we need to report back to the academy for your final grade, though I believe you'll be amazed by your grade when we return," Belia said as he then ordered the others to load up while Issei looked at the Wabajak that seemed to beckon to his call. Medusa wrapped around Issei and examined his gauntlet, feeling a strange connection to it. At the same time, Valara kept an arrow pointer at Freya, who was shivering in fear that she might die from the dark elf before they even made it to Fortitude. Later. Once the group was gone, the fort was left abandoned, as well as the bodies, before a shadow began to walk towards the dead bodies, while glaring at Greg's corpse, but more specifically at his, where a mark was burned into his skin. The shadow then dragged the body back to their cart before getting on their horse and riding into the distance with the corpse being dragged along for the ride unharmed. Hopefully, with this body's memories, and if what the reports say about Thalmor is true, I should be able to track down one of their bases, which will allow me to get closer to killing those holier-than-thou bastards," they said with gritted teeth, their eyes glowing brightly in the darkness like the eyes of a beast hunting its prey. "I'll kill them. I'll purge them all from this world and make them pay for what they did to me," the rider said, feeling their right eye covered by an eye patch. "Also, I do hope I can run into Thalara Shadowweaver. Perhaps I can ask her to join me in killing Thalmor and ending their reign once and for all," the rider said as the horse began to get closer to a home in the mountains. The rider then got off the horse and took the mare to a shed, covering her with a blanket and feeding her before unhooking the sled with the body on it. The rider then took the body into the house before placing the body on a table with a wave of their hand, before the rider took off their hood and jacket to reveal themselves as a high elf woman. This is what the high elf necromancer looks like. The high elf was sporting a curvy yet athletic toned Hergless shapely body with thinned waist and curvy hips, with heart-shaped big soft, plump ass cheeks and thick flaring toned thighs. A well-endowed busty, French Frank's cup, and characteristic of High Elvish with additional scar and a vertical line, and had looking runic tattoos on her body and platinum-colored short hair, and wears a light glass armor that enchanted with magicka, health and stamina regeneration around 30% and 25% increased damage and effect of her black magic, along with some of death magic and necromancy powers. It also has muffled sounds of her footsteps, passive enhanced speed and durability, along with temporary invisibility once she crouches and reduces the amount of magicka to use her spells. The high elf smiled as she got comfortable in her home before uttering a spell and casting it on the body, forcing Greg's eyes to open again before the body slowly sat up and spoke to the high elf. "Yes. Tell me all you know about Thalmor," the high elf said as she prepared for her hunt for the next day. The hunt to end the Thalmor cult once and for all. Meanwhile, back to Fortitude. "Let's cheer for the new commanders of the new Crimson Dragon Legion," Belius shouted as the group cheered with the others, while Issei smiled but spoke with his father figure about the gauntlet. "So this gauntlet is a relic?" Issei asked while observing the gauntlet before Tullius replied. "Yes. From what I was able to learn, this gauntlet was once the claw of a deadly dragon that was killed and sealed within this same gauntlet. I'm not sure about the gauntlet's powers, but I believe you will be able to learn about them as you continue to try to unlock their secrets," Tullius said as he looked at the prisoners that Issei's group captured before speaking to him. "What do you intend to do with them?" "For now, I want to give them an opportunity to join my legion, but if they refuse, then we can put them to work. They've lost whatever pride they had when their commander and Greg were killed at the fort," Issei said as he walked back to his group before stopping a bit. "What's wrong?" Tullius asked before Issei turned back around and hugged Tullius, shocking the general before hearing the words of the boy. "I love you, Dad," Issei said before leaving his father figure. Tullius was amazed by the boy's kindness before stopping Issei and hugging him as well. "I'm proud to call you my son. Never forget that, Issei," Tullius said, making Issei smile as he hugged back his father figure before Thalara welcomed Issei back to the group, with the casters asking him about the spell, while the warriors wished to be trained by their captain. Tullius smiled at Issei, who was bonding with the future members of his legion, until Legate smiled at him. "So, I take it you approved of the idea of Issei leading his army? He's a bit green and has a long way to go before he is ready for general, but I think this will help him, especially since I can tell that Issei will grow thanks to those who fight alongside him," Tullius replied, while watching Issei coughing as he tried some alcohol, making Belius laugh at the boy, before swapping his drink to a lighter one. The other boys chuckled at the sight of their captain, while Thalara was chugging a lot of beer like it was water. "You're not wrong, and it's best Issei has someone to watch his back, especially since Thalmor has been trying to get information on Issei's growth," Legate said as she had her annoyance at the High Elves, trying to spy on her son, before hunting them down and killing them. She doesn't know why they've taken such an interest in her son, but whatever the reason, it cannot be good, and she'll be damned if those stuck-up elves even try to lay a hand on her son. Legate smiled as she looked at her son. She was proud of how much he'd grown for the past 16 years and looked forward to seeing how this new legion would become a formidable force. After passing the final exam and being appointed as the leader of the new legion that would be part of the Imperial Army, Issei and Thalara thought that having auditions at Fortitude would allow them both to spot qualified candidates to join their legion, since Issei had an idea on the number of people in the classes. Still, he added some requirements for each of the classes for the candidates to see if they would be able to fight alongside the Imperial Army without having any issues spotting those who refused to work with others. So, after sending out the flyers for the Legion, all they could do now was wait. The classes that Issei chose for the Legion were Berserker, Monk, Ranger, Rogue, Paladin, Alchemist, Archer, Mage, Assassin, Warriors, and finally Riders. Issei wanted members of these areas to cover not just far-reaching attacks, but also close, mid-ranged attacks from either physical or magical attacks, especially from dragons. Issei both admired and feared the legendary beasts, since they had incredible powers that were so powerful that they shook the heavens and the earth. Issei hopes that one day he could meet at least one of the legendary creatures and bond with it as he did with Medusa, but for now, he's content with waiting and preparing for the battle to capture Ulfric's Stormcloak and end the Stormcloak's reign in Skyrim. Do you really think people will show up? We are a new legion, and not many species are interested in fighting for the Imperial Army. Heck, the only people we have so far are the ones from our exam, and that Nord girl who's been clingy to you since you brought her with us after that staff fused with your gauntlet," Thalara said, since she was a bit jealous of the Nord caster, Freya Stormcaller, and how she clung onto Issei out of respect and mild fear, which made the Dark Elf develop an annoyance towards the Nord and often pulled her away from him. It depends on the goal or dreams they have. Not all people don't like fighting, but what if there are other people who have a reason? like say, someone has a dream to make their parents happy or proud, or someone who wants to bring justice to the person who, say, killed their parents or did something very awful as I said, it depends on the outcome or cause of the person having a reason to fight. Issei said, making Thalara nod in understanding before she suddenly found herself held by Issei, who wrapped his arm around her shoulders, making her blush a bit and even more when he started speaking. By the way, are you jealous that you want to cling to me instead? Freya Issei teased, making Thalara sputtered in embarrassment before scoffing and denying. And no. I'm not jealous of that Nord girl. That's stupid. Yes, you are. And no, I'm not. Yes you are, just admit it. Nope. I'm not jealous. You're just imagining. Rally well, if you are new dinner and get to know her then, Issei said nonchalantly while inwardly smiling amusedly as he counted down before he was suddenly grabbed tight by Thalara and slightly pulled down, staring at the cute glaring dark elf. You listen here. If anyone should go to dinner with you, it's me, not that Nord girl. Understand? Thalara cutely growled, making him smile amusingly while raising his eyebrow. But you said you are not jealous. Yeah, well, I changed my mind, so you better not take any girl to dinner except me. Someone is being possessive but alright, if you want me to take you to dinner first, then. I will do it. Good, Thalara said as she let him go. She folded her arms and felt good about herself. Issei quietly started snickering, waiting for a moment until Thalara suddenly hit with a realization, and her face turned like a glowing tomato, upon seeing what she did. You dummy. Thalara shouted as she pounded her fists on Issei's side, making him laugh at her jealous side, before the doors to the audition opened up to reveal Freya, who was running over to them before tripping over and falling on the floor, which made Thalara roll her eyes at the clumsy girl, since Freya was good with magical research. Still, the girl was an absolute klutz who tripped over even grass and seemed to idolize Issei and Thalara, given the reports that the Stormcloaks had on them, which amused the dark elf until she saw Freya getting too close for her liking towards Issei. Alright, then klutzy. What are you doing here? Thalara asked, annoyed until Freya stuttered a response. We have some people approach the area that came with the flyers. Freya stuttered before looking at her paper. There's one Oni giant who wishes to clash with Issei-sama and appears to be part giant and part Oni. There's also a forest elf who seems to be a high elf. There also appears to be an Orsimer who claims to be from the Bloodclaw clan, a Khajiit and a Breton. As I said, these members seem to want to join, but didn't give their reasons unless they meet with you, and also because they don't trust me since I'm a Nord. Freya said with her head down until Issei leaned forward and patted her head, making Freya blush at his touch, before hearing him speak to her. You must understand that the Stormcloaks haven't left a good impression on them, making other species see Nords as the Stormcloaks, but that's why you need to open up to them and show them you aren't like the Stormcloaks. I could tell when we met that you weren't like the other Stormcloaks, who were believed to be superior to other species. That is why I wished for you to be the leader of the alchemist and mage faction of the Red Dragon Legion, since your knowledge of magic surpasses even the librarians and teachers of the Imperial Academy. So show them that you aren't like them, Freya. I say Sam, I'll do it then. I'll show them that I'm not like the Stormcloaks. Freya said in determination, making him pat her head a few times, causing the cute mage to inwardly feel happy before she left to prove herself, leaving amused Issei and a slightly annoyed dark elf. I'll give you a head pat if you want, Issei suggested, making Thalara huff and look the other way from his teasing smile. Issei then patted her head, making Thalara still pout on the outside but happy on the inside. Issei chuckled, knowing that Thalara was always a bit possessive of him back at the academy, but he saw it as a cute side of her. However, their time got cut short when a tall Orsimer appeared. Still, this one seemed to be much taller, which impressed Issei since he thought he was part giant as well, like the Oni, until he noticed how the Orsimer seemed to be much stronger and experienced than other Orsimer, until the being introduced himself with a booming voice. I am Ors, the Orsimer hero. Basically an Orsimer version of the Orc hero. I have come to join your cause to avenge my fallen clan. For too long, the Stormcloaks have attacked my kind and treated them as meat shields, food, or some reward for our bodies. I wish to kill all of the Stormcloaks and make them pay with blood for the blood they spilled from my clan and people for years. Ors shouted, which surprised the duo until Issei recalled reading about the Orsimer hero. The Orsimer clans were split into 3 different clans. The Crimson Roar, which represented power. The Azure Tears, the smallest of the 3 since they represented the intelligence of their clans, and finally, the Emerald Giants, the heroes or champions. Were the only ones capable of becoming giant size to increase their physical strength and strength, heard that they were hunted or bribed to join thieves and such, but this is my first time seeing one. But still, having an Orsimer hero is a bonus and useful for his legion army, not to mention that Orsimer is perfect for the Berserker class. Star. Hello, Ors, I'm Issei, the leader of the Red Dragon Legion, and beside me is the Lara Shadowweaver, my second in command. Now you said you wished to join to avenge your fallen clan from Stormcloak. Very well, but before this, let's fight. I want to test your skills and abilities and see how skillful you are as a combatant. Issei said to the Orsimer hero. Issei and Ors then got ready as Ors shrunk to Issei's height, surprising him until he saw that Ors was nearly upon him, forcing Issei to block the attack from the war axe with his scales, but suddenly felt his right arm getting cold, forcing Issei to leap away until he saw thin blue aura around the axe. The frost enchantment. I'm surprised since, from what I recalled, the Azure Tears were the only ones skilled in enchantment. You're not wrong. This was my master's weapon when he was part of the Crimson Roar before joining the Azure Tears. He took me on as his pupil and gave me his axe before he died by Ulfric Stormcloak. So I'll fight with my master's weapon until this blade tastes the blood and final heartbeat of the bastard who took my people's lives. Ors said before charging at Issei again, who was ready this time and summoned his short sword and blocked the axe, though the force behind the attack pushed him down on his knees until his gauntlet appeared on his left arm, shocking him as the emerald within it shined brightly. Boost. Issei felt an increase in power and started pushing back, making Ors widen his eyes in surprise before Issei pushed the axe away, causing Ors to be stunted slightly until Issei threw a punch toward Ors, making the Orsimer hero stagger backward a few times by punch until he stopped staggering and looked at Issei's gauntlet in surprise. What kind of magical artifact is that? I almost felt a sudden increase in punch from you. Ors said as it was the first time a human landed a sudden strong punch. I don't know myself, but yeah, it's known as the Claw of the Crimson Dragon, Issei said before looking at the gem, which was still glowing until Ors rubbed his chin on the ponder. I see. I've heard tales of a claw being taken from a dragon that was red as blood and turned into a gauntlet, but never saw it with my own eyes until now. Ors said before standing up again. I've seen all I need to see. Ors then held his axe out before speaking to him. I shall gladly join your legion. I hope you're open to sparks in the future. Ors said before joining the other side until Issei called in the next candidate, a forest elf, who had the wars of a high elf but seemed to be armed with multiple arrows and bolts of all kinds. She even wielded a crossbow and a short sword that had a magical effect as well, like Ors' axe. My name is Gaia. I was raised by the forest elves when my parents married into the forest elf clan. After living in the forest for so long, I decided to become a ranger and an adventurer. Unfortunately, the Stormcloaks took them over and aren't exactly welcoming to other species, so I was hoping that by joining a legion or something, I'd be able to explore and enjoy the treasures that are hidden away from Skyrim. Gaia said before Thalara narrowed her eyes at the woman and asked. And you're not part of Thalmor? Absolutely not. I refused to even join their little group after how they looked down upon my mother and father before I put a bolt in their heads and cut off those pointed ears as a warning to anyone else they sent after me, Gaia said while examining a small dagger in her left hand. It's okay, Thalara, so you said you want to join the Legion to explore and enjoy the treasures. In that case, you'll have to demonstrate your capabilities and skills as rangers. Issei said as he waved his hand, conjuring a full wooden dummy that came out from a swirling purplish blue portal that suddenly started moving. Gaia then began to aim the dummy, which began to move towards her before unleashing multiple arrows and bolts, littering the wooden dummy with the weaknesses of the human body. This impressed Issei before she moved to magic, as she then began to use reinforcement magic to make herself stronger until she stopped her attacks. I can also use restoration magic, and as a forest elf, I can connect with nature and ask for help from the animals to fight alongside me, Gaia said before Issei looked at Thalara, who grumbled a bit before nodding. Then I welcome you to the Legion, Issei said, making Gaia glad until she joined them before the door opened to reveal a female Khajiit. However, she seemed to be more human than feline, since the only feline attributes were her cat ears, claws, and eyes. Naya. My name is Arya. It's an honor to be here at the Legion. Apologies, I don't look like my kind, but I'm unique since I was actually kicked out of my camp due to me appearing more human than the other Khajiit. Arya explained. It's okay, Miss Arya. Now, why don't you tell us about yourself and your reason for joining the Legion? Issei said as Arya smiled and nodded. Well, I am a Khajiit, but I specialize in conjuration, however, I don't have a spirit familiar like the others of my camp due to me being a half-breed. My mother was a Khajiit, but my father was a human. I don't know if they were Nord or another human-like species, but I know it's the reason why I'm not like the others. I'm skilled in being a rogue since I can pick up the sound of enemies from afar and see in the dark. I am also trained hand-to-hand. Why you can also use me as a meat shield if you need one. Gaia said as she rubbed her left sleeve with nervousness until Issei saw scars on her arms, which made his eyes narrow at them. Thalara and Arya were shocked to see Issei walk towards the Khajiit before seeing the scars on her sleeves. You've hurt yourself, haven't you? Arya looked away as she fell on her head. It's the only way a filthy half-breed like me can redeem myself in the eyes of my people. And yet they still abandoned you? God, yes. Listen, don't pay attention to those ignorant individuals. They are not worth your time. You are far from being a filthy half-breed. I see a beautiful girl who needs to recognize her worth and understand how precious she is, a girl who I can trust as a great companion and become the greatest rogue ever. Issei said gently as he patted her head, causing her to stare at him in shock and disbelief as her eyes started getting teary and trails on her cheeks. Star. From now on, never hurt yourself anymore, and if those idiots abandoned you, then forget about them. It's not worth injuring you just because you are half-breed. He rubs her head gently, causing Arya to cry and sniff before she goes to hold him tightly, crying silently on his shoulder. At the same time, he pats her gently on the back and has his hand laying on the scars before a soft bright green aura glows on the scars themselves, slowly disappearing and fading until Arya doesn't have scars anymore. Why, you really don't mind even though I'm a filthy half-breed? Arya asked. Issei shook his head, making her cry into his shoulder until her eyes dried of tears. Valara helped Arya over to the other side, which made the dark elf feel sad for the girl, as she wanted to help Arya so she'd never harm herself again. Issei looked at Arya once more, feeling sorry for the poor girl, before calling for the next two. A Breton and Oni giant appeared. The Breton appeared in some casual armor, but seemed to have no weapons besides his armor. The Oni giant was much taller and bulkier than other giants. He had crimson red skin, what appeared to be some iron mace on his back, and some mask and cloak around his body. It's an honor to meet you, for I am Paladin Breton. Your name is your species name. I was never truly given a name, so I went by Paladin Breton to have one, Breton said before the Oni giant roared as he shouted. I am Matrona. I was the strongest of the giants before I left the giants when I unlocked my Oni heritage. Matrona said, surprising the group as the voice was deep and low due to the mask. Well, it's nice to meet you both. Now, tell me the reason why you two want to join the Legion and what kind of skills you both have. Issei asked the Oni giant and the Paladin Breton. Star. Paladin Breton went first after Matrona nodded his way. I joined since I've been after one of Ulfric Stormcloak's men, since they've been terrorizing innocent civilians and other species, all because they think their way is right and that the other species should submit to them. I was just a paladin in training when I saw the Stormcloaks rise, but I couldn't agree with their ideals. Yes, while I admit that the Imperial Army is not perfect, they at least accept and respect the other species by their side. In contrast, the Stormcloaks look down upon the others and believe they are superior to them, which is why I wish to protect the innocent. I specialize in combat due to my training as a paladin and swordsmanship, but I can also become stronger as I absorb magic through my armor and skin. It's known as magical enhancement. The more powerful the magic that hits me, the tougher my armor and skin become. Paladin Breton explained before readying himself. If you don't believe me, then fire away with any spell you have. Paladin Breton said before Issei nodded and summoned his dragon lightning, making the paladin hiss a bit before his body became bulkier and more durable, as the lightning then didn't harm him anymore. Very impressive, alright then. Next, it's your turn, Mr. Matrona. Issei said, seeing how useful the paladin is for his legion, before looking at Matrona. Matrona merely walked towards Issei, her steps shaking the ground with each step until she summoned her massive iron mace, which was even taller than Issei himself, before speaking to Issei. Isseiriki. The giant respects strength, which craves blood, violence, and death. In order to gain my respect, I ask for a fight to the death. If you kill, then I will join you. As for the resurrection, I have a spell and soul stone to help with it. Matrona said as she reached into her cloak and pulled out a scroll in medium-sized soul stone, shocking Issei since he'd heard of soul stones being used to create powerful and deadly weapons that absorb the souls of others when they're killed by said weapon. I'm surprised since I've never heard of an Oni being prepared for death, much less a resurrection spell, Issei said before Matrona explained. The Oni may be warriors who thrive on bloodshed and death, but we even have our code of honor when facing enemies. That is why we prepare a resurrection scroll and a soul gem as the cost for said spell. Also, if you defeat me in battle, I wish to reveal to you the location of a deadly blade that you may be interested in, since it is a very powerful blade that I believe your enemies will be interested in if they are able to control it. Matrona said before Issei agreed to the conditions as the Oni prepared her iron mace. Double, Matrona muttered as an illusion of the mace appeared above the weapon before Issei summoned the crimson gauntlet. Boost, Issei muttered under his breath before the boost happened, strengthening Issei's body and reflexes until the Oni made the first move by shouting a war cry and charging towards Issei. She then swung her mace and clashed with the gauntlet, which pushed Issei down a bit after blocking the hit. The second impact shook Issei's body so much that the force of the second attack almost blew him away. Damn. That's some conjuration. Issei said before summoning a shield and throwing it like a disc that he played with some of the dogs before getting Medusa, causing Matrona to dodge the attack, but wasn't expecting it to bounce back and slam into the back of her head, causing her to groan a bit while rubbing it until she growled at Issei, who just reclaimed his shield before. And now the tides turned in my favor, Issei said before rushing towards Matrona, who was regaining her bearings until she saw Issei heading towards her, which made her blood boil before she released a roar that was so loud, it pushed Issei back a few feet until he stabbed the shield and gauntlet in the ground, since he wasn't going to be sent back into that cave with the spiders. Issei then noticed Matrona running toward him and went to swing her mace at him, who immediately rolled under the attack before stopping and standing up. Matrona turned around and immediately rushed toward him. At the same time, he used his shield to block the attack before pushing away and immediately thrusting his shield on Matrona's stomach, making her grunt. He immediately staggered backward before she was hit on her face by the shield, causing her to grunt again and unconsciously, making her mace down on the ground. Issei grabs the mace with his gauntlet and starts boosting, strengthening his strength before successfully lifting the heavy mace and swinging at Matrona. He hits her on the face hard, causing her to stagger backward, spitting saliva and blood on the ground, and then falls to the ground. Matrona groaned and wincingly looked up, only to see Issei standing in front of her with her mace now pointing at her face. "Yes, that means I win, and before you say anything, it will be a waste of time just to use a resurrection spell, because you want to fight to death. I can already see you are indeed a powerful warrior, and it will be a shame to have you die. Plus, I'll admit that I'm still a bit weary about using a soul stone to resurrect someone from death. Sure, enchanting weapons with soul stone sounds useful, but resurrecting someone, yeah, I'm not sure about that. There can be many things that could go wrong about this whole resurrection thing, and I'm not even sure if that could work," Issei said as he lowered the mace and looked at Matrona, who was quiet after listening to his reason. "So what do you say? Want to join my legion?" Matrona slowly stood up and reclaimed her mace before bowing back at Issei. "I would be honored," Matrona said until she had the symbol placed on her armor, while Freya rushed in and bowed to Issei and the others. "Issei-sama. I have news that my comrades who were a part of the Stormcloaks wish to join us, plus there are a couple of other members of the Imperial Army who wish to meet the others. I'm surprised since I thought more of the other species would appear to join us," Freya said, a bit disappointed that they were only able to gain a small number of other species to join them. "It's just the first day, Freya. The Imperial Army wasn't built in a day, and besides, this will allow us to work with them and test their limits and what we need to improve on for our future battles," Issei said before he turned to see his newest members of the Legion. "I thank you all for coming to join us today. Your unique skills and determination will be invaluable to the Crimson Dragon Legion. Each of you has faced your challenges, whether it was either discrimination from your clan, the cruelty of the Stormcloaks, or another group, or given the difficult lives you led in Skyrim. Together, we will harness that strength to strengthen common goals. The journey ahead will be arduous, but I have faith in our combined abilities that we'll be able to accomplish not only our objectives, but also assist in the fate of Skyrim," Issei said, his voice resonating with confidence. Alara stepped forward, her eyes scanning the recruits with a mix of curiosity and scrutiny. "As your second in command, I'll ensure that you are all integrated smoothly into our ranks. Training will be rigorous but necessary for the battles ahead. We'll start with assessing your strengths and weaknesses before working on team cohesion. Remember, our success depends on our ability to work together as a unit." Ors, the Orsimer hero, nodded with a determined glint in his eyes. "I look forward to proving my worth in battle and avenging my fallen clan. The Stormcloaks will pay for their atrocities." Aya, the forest elf, smiled slightly, adjusting her quiver. "Exploration and adventure await us, but so does the fight for justice. I'm ready to stand by your side and uncover the hidden treasures of Skyrim." Arya, the Khajiit rogue, stepped forward hesitantly but with newfound determination. I will do my best and prove my worth and show that even a half-breed has the strength to strengthen those who cannot protect themselves. I'm ready to leave my past behind and fight for a better future." Aladin Breton and Matrona, the Oni giant, both nodded in agreement, their expressions resolute. "We are ready to serve, to fight, and to uphold the honor of the Crimson Dragon Legion," Breton said, his voice firm. Matrona added, "Strength and strength guide us. I will fight with all my might to see our enemies fall." Issei felt a surge of pride as he looked at his new comrades. "Together, we will forge a path to victory. The Crimson Dragon Legion will become a beacon of hope and strength until Thorncloaks and Thalmor perish. Prepare yourselves, the road ahead will be tough, but I know we are ready for the challenge." With that, the newly formed Legion members dispersed to prepare for their training, each determined to prove their worth and fight for their shared cause. Issei and Thalara watched them go, a sense of anticipation and excitement filling the air. "Are you ready for this, Thalara?" Issei asked, a confident smile on his face. Valara smirked back at him. More than ready, Issei. Let's show the world what the Crimson Dragon Legion can do. The battlefield near Whiterun was a grim and foreboding place, the skies grey and heavy with impending conflict. Ulfric Stormcloak stood at the crest of a hill, surveying the rugged terrain below where his men, the brave Stormcloaks, prepared for battle. Their faces were set with determination, but there was an undercurrent of fear as they readied themselves for the onslaught of the Imperial Army's Crimson Dragon Legion. The Crimson Dragon Legion had been gathering many different kinds of creatures ranging from Nord, Imperial, Breton, Argonian, Khajiit, Dunmer Dark Elves, Altmer High Elves, Bosmer Wood Elves, and Orsimer Orcs. Ulfric was shocked that some of their own Nord brethren decided to work for the Imperials after Issei and his legion conquered their camps and forts. Especially the traitor known as Freya Stormcaller, who was the one responsible for both the camps that the Stormcloaks hid in the mountains and the forts that were destroyed as well. Those traitors will soon feel my blade when I punish them for betraying our people. Plus, if I can bring the boy's head to his mother, that treacherous woman, then it'll give me sweet relief to see her shocked expression when I show her son's severed head. Ulfric said as he heard a whisper of wings that broke the tense silence. The messenger, clad in the livery of the Stormcloaks and bearing the enchanted wings of a bird from a conjurer, swooped down from the sky, landing lightly before Ulfric. They come to my Jarl, the messenger gasps, the Crimson Dragon Legion approaches. Their numbers and weapons far outstrip our own. Ulfric remained silent, his piercing eyes fixed on the horizon. It was his second-in-command, Barbro Andrian Stormcloak, Ulfric's son, who responded with an aggressive look in his eyes. Numbers do not always win a battle, and besides, who cares about the traitors since they'll soon die? True, Ulfric replied, his voice a low rumble, agreeing with his son. But I bet it helps. The distant blare of a war horn shattered the stillness, and the first ranks of the Crimson Dragon Legion appeared, a menacing tide of warriors and fantastical creatures. Some of the Stormcloaks shivered in fear, their resolve tested by the sight of such an overwhelming force. Ors, the Orsimer hero, was leading the front that was made with the warriors, berserkers, and paladins. Along the Orsimer hero were two others known as Paladin Breton and Matrona, the Oni giant, who were also dating, which wasn't much of a surprise, since their fellow leaders knew that the giant and Breton were compatible with each other. Next were the rangers, assassins, and rogues, which both Gaia, the forest elf, and Arya, the Khajiit rogue, led. Issei had the two together, hoping that Arya would be able to help Gaia be more cautious when dealing with the enemy and their adventures. At the same time, Gaia could rub some of her confidence into Arya. Luckily, the two were able to help each other, and Issei was happy that Arya had grown a bit of a spine. However, there was still some of the old Arya in there, like the time she was scared of lightning that she snuggled with Issei when back at their base, which Issei didn't mind, since he grew accustomed to the Khajiit and comforted her. Issei turned to see Freya and Valara, who were in charge of the monks, alchemists, archers, and mages. Freya and Valara had an odd relationship since Issei knew that Freya was the klutzy Nord at times. Still, in battle and magic, she was a confident and strong woman, that is until Valara scared Freya, causing the Nord girl to try and understand why she scares her all the time, which only made Valara amused before she stayed as Issei's loyal second-in-command and dear friend. Lastly, the riders were led by Issei as he rode a chariot pulled by a fearsome owlbear that Gaia and Issei saved when it was caught by a group of Thalmor that tried to tame the creature to fight for them. Luckily, they managed to save the owlbear, and it was grateful for them both, so Issei asked Gaia for advice on the owlbear to take care of him since the beast's the Thalmor killed mother. Gaia understood Issei's reasons and taught him how to tend to the owlbear, Shiro, which Issei named after freshly fallen snow. As the months passed, the owlbear grew closer to Issei and wished to join him and pull his chariot, which Issei received from his father, so Issei agreed to the small one's demand. In the past few months, the boy learned about the strange gauntlet he had and learned that it was known as the Claw of the Red Dragon. That didn't sound as intimidating until Issei read and learned more about the powers that the gauntlet held before asking Ors to help teach him about enchanted weapons and such. Thankfully, Ors was able to help Issei learn how to harness the power of the boosts, which also helped him unlock new techniques such as a dragon shot and transfer. Issei was even able to unlock some armor that made his presence imposing on their enemies, a symbol of the Empire's relentless might. The familiars even grew as well since the two were much stronger, training alongside their new allies. They were surprised when they saw that the Legion was composed of all different species, and sure, they didn't always get along, but Issei didn't let that deter him from helping them resolve their issues. The Crimson Dragon Legion was more than a legion. It was a family. They worked together and look out for each other through thick and thin. Issei raised his voice, addressing his legion with a commanding tone while he narrowed his eyes, his gaze fixed on Ulfric, the man responsible for the war. The Imperial army does not need prisoners. Kill them all, but leave Ulfric alive for his execution. The Crimson Dragon Legion roared in approval, their battle cries filling the air as they formed into their disciplined ranks, until Issei looked at Ors and nodded before Orsimer smiled in response. Attack! Ors shouted as the berserkers, warriors, and paladins charged with Matrona and Breton following them as well, with Ulfric pulling out his sword and being nervous about this battle, since Ulfric was captured and executed, then the civil war would be lost. Ulfric watched the army charge towards them, which made the others nervous until Ulfric chopped his sword forward, which alerted the griffins and flyers to soar into the air and begin their assault on the first wave. Ors looked at the attack from above before calling to the rangers and other far-ranged attackers. "Look to the sky." Ors shouted with Matrona and Breton, warning the others, while Thalara signaled the rangers, mages, and archers to take aim and fire upon the flyers, which they did. The griffins and flyers dropped stones and arrows, but their numbers were being thinned quickly due to the far-ranged fighters having excellent weapons and vision to attack them in the air. All flyers and griffins fall back. The messenger from before said as they began to soar back to the back lines while attempting to avoid the arrows and magic blasts. Ulfric then looked at his son and asked, "Are you with me, my son?" "Till the death," Father Barbaro said, with Ulfric shouting his war cry. "For Skyrim. And for the Stormcloaks." The horse neighed and charged, with the others following behind the Stormcloaks by his side. They charged into battle as they readied for the battle of their leader and Jarl. The Stormcloaks, led by Ulfric and Barbaro, charged down the hill with a fierce battle cry. Their swords and axes gleamed in the dim light and their shields raised high as they prepared to meet the oncoming wave of the Crimson Dragon Legion. The ground shook with the thunder of their footsteps, a rumbling echo of their determination and defiance. Ors and the others readied themselves while Issei and the second wave stayed behind, awaiting his command before Issei looked at the rear, compassed of their archers and mages. "Arya. Freya. Open a portal to their rear and ambush them," Issei said, which made the duo excited before they prepared to use the portal spell, that they learned to open a portal that would allow their enemies to be unaware of them, but it took about 10 minutes to set up. "Once the portal is ready, then open it on their rear and we'll flank them," Issei said, as the duo got to work with Thalara and Gaia watching over their foes with their eagle vision. "I'm surprised that the Golden Child is here with his father. He must be either brave or stupid," Thalara said while Gaia nodded in response. "Possibly both, since most Stormcloaks are that way," Gaia said, until they heard the two forces collide with a loud crash. The frontline Stormcloaks met the berserkers head-on, their shields clashing against the massive weapons of their foes. Ulfric swung his sword with lethal precision, cutting down enemies with every strike. Barbaro fought beside him, his youthful vigor and ferocity a match for any opponent. The Stormcloaks' initial momentum carried them into the heart of the Crimson Dragon Legion, but they soon found themselves engulfed by the sheer numbers of their enemies. Issei, from his chariot pulled by Shiro the Owlbear, watched the chaos unfold. His eyes glinted with a mixture of admiration and resolve as he saw the Stormcloaks fighting valiantly against his forces. "Brave but foolish," Issei said before he saw his forces deal with their momentum instantly. Ors roared and swung his massive axe, cleaving through Stormcloak shields and armor with ease, making many of them fall. At the same time, Paladin Breton and Matrona fought side by side. Their coordinated attacks combined their special skills and weapons, cutting a swath through the enemy ranks. "The portal is almost done, my lord," Freya said as the portal began to open. Issei smiled before looking at Gaia and Arya. "Take your groups and flank their rear. Show them why you shouldn't underestimate your people," Issei said before both Gaia and Arya nodded as they crossed a portal that they opened in the Stormcloaks' camp behind their entire army. Freya and Thalara stayed by Issei's side as the sky above was a maelstrom of griffins and flyers that Thales and her archers were shooting down with their arrows, while Freya and her mages fired their magic from fireballs, frost, and sparks. The Stormcloak archers, perched on the hill, unleashed volleys of arrows that rained down on the advancing Crimson Dragon Legion until Gaia and Arya's forces overpowered them as they killed the archers and mages in quick succession, made Ulfric look at them in shock, feeling stupid for being fooled by his enemies. Ulfric then spotted Freya Stormcaller amidst the fray, her traitorous figure commanding a group of mages and archers, along with Thalara. His eyes burned with fury as he charged toward her, cutting down any Imperial soldier in his path. Freya saw him coming and began to weave a spell, but Ulfric was too quick. He knocked her staff aside with a powerful swing of his sword and grabbed her by the collar. "Traitor!" Ulfric snarled, lifting her off the ground. "You will pay for betraying your people." Freya struggled, her eyes wide with fear, but before Ulfric could deliver the final blow, a blast of fire magic struck him from behind, knocking him to the ground. Thalara stood there, her hands crackling with fire. "You will not touch her," she hissed, stepping protectively in front of Freya. Barbaro saw his father fall and let out a furious roar. He fought his way towards Ulfric, his sword a blur of steel. "Stay away from my father," he shouted, cleaving through enemy soldiers in his path. Issei, seeing the Stormcloak leader's son charge at his people, made Issei growl at the fool before he urged Shiro forward. The owlbear charged through the battlefield, scattering Stormcloaks and Imperials alike. Issei leaped from the chariot, his gauntlet glowing with a fierce red light. Boost. Issei then yelled as he landed in front of Barbaro and pulled out his dual swords, which made Barbaro yell as he clashed with Issei. Still, the son of Ricky was honestly amused as he swiped Barbaro's sword away and cut his cheek, which made Barbaro fall to the ground while Issei was still standing, his presence imposing and undeniable. Barbaro yelled as Issei clashed with Barbaro's sword and shield until Issei kicked Barbaro back by the shield and used his sword to stab his shield arm, causing Barbaro to yell in pain, before Issei used his remaining sword to throw away Barbaro's sword until Issei summoned the gauntlet and created a sphere of green energy in it until he aimed it at Barbaro's dot. At the same time, Valara pulled Ulfric to his knees and aiming his face at Issei's hand. "This ends now, Ulfric," Issei said, his voice cold and commanding. "Your rebellion dies here." Dragon shot. The blast entered Barbaro's and it tore his body apart, causing Ulfric to scream in anger and sadness. "No." Ulfric yelled as the Stormcloaks looked to see their leader was defeated as well as his son, before Issei looked up at the battle and then to Ulfric, who was still reeling from the magical blast and glaring at Issei with all of the rage in his body. Issei told Valara to let him go, and so she did, but Ulfric struggled to his feet due to the magic blast until he steadied himself and locked eyes with Issei, his expression a mixture of defiance and resignation. "Skyrim will never bow to the Empire," Ulfric spat, raising his sword for what he knew could be his final stand. "And you'll pay for killing my son." "Heh. I would like to see you try, Ulfric, but I wouldn't hold my breath since it seems that this battle is coming to an end," Issei said, readying his two blades, which were covered in Barbaro's blood, which made Ulfric even more enraged before he yelled and charged at Issei. Ulfric's charge was full of rage and despair. His sword raised high as he screamed a battle cry for his fallen son. Issei met him head-on, his dual swords flashing in the dim light as he parried Ulfric's frenzied strikes with calculated precision. The clash of steel echoed across the battlefield, drawing the attention of both Stormcloaks and the Crimson Dragon Legion. Ulfric's strikes were powerful but reckless, driven by his grief and anger. Issei, on the other hand, moved with the grace and efficiency of a seasoned warrior, each movement precise and deliberate. He deflected Ulfric's blows with ease, his attacks measured and devastating. The power of the claw of the red dragon radiated from him, enhancing his strength and speed. "You fight with passion, Ulfric, but passion alone will not win this war," Issei said, his voice calm amidst the chaos. "Your cause is noble, but it is misguided." Ulfric roared in response, his attacks becoming even more desperate. "You know nothing of our cause. We fight for our freedom, for our right to rule ourselves." Issei sidestepped a wild swing from Ulfric and delivered a swift kick to his stomach, sending the Stormcloak leader sprawling to the ground. "And how many lives have been lost for this freedom?" Issei asked, his voice carrying a note of sadness before kicking Ulfric on the ground again. "How many sons and daughters have died because of your rebellion?" Ulfric struggled to his feet, panting heavily. His eyes were filled with a mix of rage and sorrow. "Too many," he admitted, his voice breaking. "But I cannot stop now. I cannot let their sacrifices be in vain." Issei shook his head, his expression one of pity. "Then you leave me no choice." With a swift and fluid motion, Issei disarmed Ulfric, sending his sword flying from his grasp. He then delivered a powerful blow to Ulfric's with the hilt of his sword, knocking him to the ground. Ulfric lay there, defeated and broken, his eyes staring up at the sky, as if seeking some form of divine intervention. The battlefield around them began to quiet as the remaining Stormcloaks saw their leader fall. Their morale shattered, many threw down their weapons and surrendered, while others fled in terror. The Crimson Dragon Legion stood victorious, their disciplined ranks holding firm as they rounded up the remaining Stormcloak soldiers. Issei looked down at Ulfric, his expression solemn. "Your rebellion ends here, Ulfric Stormcloak. You will be taken to solitude, where you will answer for your crimes." Ulfric closed his eyes, a single tear rolling down his cheek. "May Talos forgive me," he whispered. Issei turned to his legion, raising his voice to be heard over the battlefield. "Victory is ours. The Stormcloaks are defeated, and Skyrim will know peace once more." A cheer rose from the ranks of the Crimson Dragon Legion, their voices echoing across the plains. The Battle of Whiterun was over, and the future of Skyrim had been decided. As Issei stood there surveying the aftermath of the battle, he couldn't help but feel a pang of sorrow for the lives lost on both sides. War was never without its cost, but he hoped that this victory would bring about lasting peace for the people of Skyrim. The road ahead would be difficult, but with the strength and unity of the Crimson Dragon Legion, he was confident that they could rebuild and create a better future for all. Valara stood by his side and comforted her lover before hugging him. "We've lost a few good people in this battle, but their sacrifices will not be in vain," Valara said before placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You helped them stand on their feet and fight back against the Stormcloaks that hurt many of their people, and now that they're defeated, we can begin to work on the path to peace and prosperity," Valara said before Issei sighed and nodded before thanking his lover and let himself fall into her arms. Freya watched them and felt a pang of envy in her heart since she admired and loved Issei as well. Still, she knew Thalara had his heart before Thalara looked Freya's way and called her to them, which surprised Freya before she nodded for Freya to hug Issei, which made Nord so happy. The war was over, and now it was a time to celebrate and begin the Age of Peace. 2 years later. In the years that followed, the Crimson Dragon Legion worked tirelessly with the Imperial Army to restore order and rebuild the damage done by the war. Ulfric was taken to Solitude, where he faced trial and was ultimately executed for his crimes against the Empire. His death marked the end of the Stormcloak Rebellion and the beginning of a new era for Skyrim. Issei, now a celebrated hero, continued to lead the Crimson Dragon Legion with wisdom and compassion. His actions during the war had earned him the respect and loyalty of his troops, and under his leadership, the Legion flourished. The people of Skyrim, once divided by civil war, began to come together and rebuild their lives. The wounds of the past would take time to heal, but with the guidance of leaders like Issei and the strength of the Crimson Dragon Legion, there was hope for a brighter future. And so, the tale of the Battle of Whiterun and the fall of Ulfric Stormcloak became a legend, a story passed down through the generations as a testament to the courage and resilience of the people of Skyrim. After the war, the Crimson Dragon Legion began to clash with the Thalmor, who was responsible for resurrecting many ancient dragons from the dead, along with a skilled necromancer high elf. The Legion was able to deal with the dragons. It granted some sacrifices that were lost in dealing with said dragons, until Issei was able to consume the souls of a dragon, which led to Issei and the Imperial Army realizing that the Dragonborn was by their side. This event led to Issei seeing out the Greybeards and the Legion being led by the leaders, so Issei could better learn how to harness the powers of the Dragonborn. However, at the Greybeards' home, the Imperial leader soon learned that his gauntlet, the Claw of the Crimson Dragon, contained the soul of a dragon, which led to Issei learning of Drake within the boosted gear and its powers. Shocking Issei until he trained with them to learn more about his powers and the boosted gear. The Greybeards are impressed by Issei's powers before sending him to find the last of the Greybeards, until he finds out that the last Greybeard has been dead for so long and left with a note. The note that led to Issei meeting the same necromancer who was working with Thalmor. Her name was Morith and her nickname was the Unkindly Fallen Lady Undead. Nicknames aside, Morith knew of Issei's powers and abilities before asking him to assist her in taking down Thalmor, and in return, she would provide them with the locations of the dragons. Issei agreed to the terms, and together, they were able to use their resources to bring down the dragons. The Thalmor were thinned to almost nothing, but the issue was that the leader of the Thalmor vanished through a dimensional portal and vowed that he would return to regain his immortality. Now that Thalmor was no longer there, the Emperor was able to help the other races of Skyrim, which also led to the Crimson Dragon Legion disbanding and going their ways to make their dreams come true. Ors returned to his clan with the other Ors of the Crimson Dragon Legion and rebuilt his clan, but the clan was a combination of all three of them, showing that the Ors could learn from their ancestors and all the skills they wielded. Ors also found a female to marry and had a son to raise as the next leader of the Ors clan. Ai returned to her village and continued being an adventurer, enjoying the experience with the memories of her comrades. She never settled down like her sister did, but she enjoyed being an aunt to her little niece. Arya stayed behind in Solitude and stayed by Issei's side since she wished to continue serving him and fighting, especially since she had cut all ties with her family and no longer wanted to do anything with them. Breton and Matrona actually retired from being soldiers and settled down in a land where they were welcomed and had a family with a son and daughter. A mix of a Breton and Oni giant made for a chaotic lair, but Matrona definitely had her motherly instincts awakened and cared for them. At the same time, Breton also taught the children of the village how to hunt and defend against enemies or predators, thanks to the skills he learned from Gaia. As for Freya and Thalara, the two stayed with Issei as well and remained at his side as part of a smaller but still strong legion that served the Imperial Army. Granted, Thalmor and the Stormcloak leaders may be gone, but their followers are still alive and waiting for a chance to return. Issei, on the other hand, was now 18 years old and was a general who was actually asked to take over by his father figure, Tullius, due to his retirement after the Thalmor fell. Issei accepted the position and continued to serve the Imperial Army. Still, on the anniversary of Issei's birthday, when Legate found him and brought him to the Imperials, there was a shock that shook the world of Skyrim when an old enemy emerged from the shadows. Belander Elith is the leader of the Thalmor. My. It's been a while since I've been in Skyrim, and it's amazing how much has changed. Belander said before looking at the portal and speaking to his partner. Are you coming? Valander asked before a figure emerged from the portal. The man stretched his wings while taking in the view of the land. So this is Skyrim, huh? How interesting. And you're sure that your people will welcome me? The man asked before Valander replied. Of course they will. Unfortunately, it's hard to tell how many of Thalmor still exist since 2 years is a long time and losing many lives has dropped off Thalmor, but I have faith that my followers are waiting in the shadows. Valander said before looking at his partner. And you sure no one followed us, Kakabiel? Of course, now let's get going since we don't want to be spotted. The man now known as Kakabiel said before the leader of Thalmor nodded as he closed the portal and headed to a nearby village to hide for the evening, unaware that they weren't the only ones who came through the portal. The black-haired girl gritted her teeth as she was healing the wounds on her left arm and she was growling at the loss of Kakabiel and Valander. Damn it. I missed them. The girl said as she hissed in pain while looking at her arm. And I can't fight well in this condition. The girl then began to walk to the forest and was surprised to see that there was a village of forest elves nearby. They saw the girl's condition and took her in before tending to her injuries. And this evening was the beginning of the second war. The war for DXD in Skyrim. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow the Nefarious Doctor for writing that awesome fanfic and also make sure to comment on this story link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.